Chapter 2711. Huang Lin, of course. The Dao sects that could control the pier were all relatively powerful. After all, the pier was a place with high profits. There were so many cultivators entering and exiting the pier every day, and every cultivator had to pay a certain amount of crystal stones. The amount of crystal stones they received every day was terrifying. Even an ordinary Taoist sect level force would slowly grow stronger by relying on the pier. And this Impermanence Pier was controlled by Impermanence Palace, and Impermanence Palace was the only Dao sects in the area. Of course, Impermanence Palace's foundation was extremely deep, and they were one of the top Dao sections. It could be said that Impermanence Palace was an existence that could not be offended in this area and could be considered a local tyrant. Not long after Gui Shan left with Zhuowen, the pier suddenly became lively, and there was an uproar. A group of about 20 people walked over from behind the pier, and the person in the lead had an extraordinary aura. His strength was unfathomable, and his aura was as terrifying as the abyss. Just by standing there, this person gave off an extremely terrifying sense of oppression. This person looked to be in his 40s, and his long hair draped over his shoulders. He wore a black robe, and his gaze was cold and oppressive. Looking carefully, there was a hint of anger between his brows, as if something was bothering him. Beside this middle-aged man, there was an old man in his 60s with a ruddy complexion. He was smiling as he followed beside this middle-aged man. Zhuowen and Gui Shan did not walk far, and naturally noticed the sudden change in atmosphere at the pier. They turned around and saw this group of people. Who are they? Zhuowen saw that the pier had quietened down after this group of people appeared, and he could not help but ask. Gui Shan also saw this group of people, and his body trembled as he said excitedly, "It's actually Palace Master. I never thought that Palace Master would personally come to the pier, and that person is from the Huangji aristocratic family." Heavens! Why is the Huangji aristocratic family also here? Did something big happen? Gui Shan shouted excitedly, and Zhuowen frowned, but he did not say anything. From Gui Shan's words, Zhuowen knew that the old man in the group was actually the Palace Master of Impermanence Palace. Anika Palace Master was actually smiling at the middle-aged man. It seemed like this middle-aged man was an existence of high status even in the Huangji family. Speaking of which, Zhuowen had quite a bit of conflict with the irregular palace and the Huangji family. The young palace master of the Impermanence Palace, young Master Impermanence, was killed by Zhuowen. The third prince of the Huangji family, Huangze, was also killed by Zhuowen. At the same time, the two primordial chaos lords from Impermanence Palace were also killed by Zhuowen. Of course, compared to Impermanence Palace's losses, Huangji family's losses were truly disastrous. Huangze was originally a silkpants. Although he was a direct descendant of the Huangji family, he wasn't the type that was highly valued. The Huangji family didn't care too much about the loss of Elder Bai and Elder Wu, who were both peak primordial chaos cultivators. However, Zoda was a Heaven's Mandate Master and was considered a powerful existence in the second step Dao validation. Even the Huangji family had to spend a lot of resources to cultivate such an expert. Losing him like this was extremely painful for the Huangji family. If Zoda's death was only painful, then the death of an eternal array Dao great master like Master Yuan, who was really a great loss to the Huangji family. This time, the Huangji family had discovered that the life flames of Huangze, Master Yuan Hui, and the others had all been extinguished, causing an internal commotion within the family. Therefore, they had sent the third master of the Huangji family, Huang Lin, to the 8 heavens to investigate the truth. Zhuowen watched Huang Lin, Palace Master Fuqi, and the others leave the dock and enter the natural moat before withdrawing his gaze. Even the Huangji family has been alarmed. It seems like something big has happened in the eight heavens. Gui Shan also withdrew his gaze and muttered to himself in confusion. Let's go. Aren't you going to bring me to the inn? Zhuowen said indifferently. Gui Shan glanced at Zhuowen indifferently and nodded before continuing to bring Zhuowen to the inn. In the empty natural moat, an incomparably huge spaceship swept towards the depths of the natural moat at an extremely fast speed. On the deck of the spaceship, Huang Lin stood at the bow with his hands behind his back. His gaze was solemn, and there was a faint anger surging in the depths of his eyes. Master Huang Lin, is Master Yuan Hui really dead? Fu Qi, the palace master of Impermanence Palace, carefully stood behind Huang Lin and asked tentatively. Huang Lin clenched his fist and said coldly, You guessed right. Yuan Hui's life flame has been extinguished. Not only him, but that wastrel Huang Zhe is also dead. Even the guards that Huang Zhe brought with him have all been annihilated. Fu Qi revealed a look of horror and said, How is this possible? Grandmaster Yuan Hui is an eternal-level array Dao Godmaster, even in the host domain, or even the Xianmi heavenly domain. Only the true pinnacle powerhouses can kill him. It is impossible for the eight heavens to have such a powerhouse. Huang Lin snorted and said, But Yuan Hui was killed just like that. There must be some expert hiding in the eight heavens who doesn't know what's good for him. How dare he kill someone from my Huangji family? Even if you're a third-step Dao validation expert, you won't be able to bear the consequences. Fu Qi suddenly knelt on one knee and said sincerely, Master Huang Lin, my son also died in the eight heavens. I heard that the Huangji family has a treasure that can trace back time and space and can track down the murderer. I hope that Master Huang Lin can help my son track down the murderer. Huang Lin looked at Fu Qi coldly. He knew what Fu Qi was planning when he saw Fu Qi following him. Fu Qi, using the Sun-Moon Demon, mirror consumes a lot of essence energy. Even the great master can't use it too many times. If you really want to find the murderer, you have to pay a sufficient price, said Huang Lin. Fu Qi's eyes flickered, as if he had made up his mind. Lord Huang Lin, this lowly one has discovered a special class heavenly law origin crystal mine. The mine is extremely vast, and this lowly one wishes to use this opportunity to offer the special class heavenly law origin crystal mine. I hope Lord Huang Lin can put in a good word for me. Huang Lin's eyes lit up the moment he heard about the special class heavenly Dao origin crystal vein. A special class heavenly Dao origin crystal vein was extremely rare even in the Xianmi heavenly region. Fu Qi was really lucky to have found it. Chapter 27:12. Inside the inn. All right, if what you said is true, I believe the first master will be willing to use the Sun-Moon Demon Mirror for you. However, to use the Sun-Moon Demon Mirror to go back to the past, you need to collect the person's aura after they died. When we return to the eight heavens, you will collect the young palace master's aura, and I will collect Yuan Hui's aura. Huang Lin reminded carefully, pointing out the importance of this matter. Fu Qi naturally nodded, not daring to be careless about this matter. If I find out who the murderer is, my Huangji clan will drag that person out no matter where we go, peel off his skin, pull out his tendons, and burn his soul in flames for countless years to let him experience the feeling of living a life worse than death. Huang Lin's gaze landed on the other side of the heavenly chasm, in the direction of the eight heavens. His gaze was cold as he thought to himself. Zhuowen looked at the slightly dilapidated inn in front of him and frowned slightly. On the way here, Gui Shan had been praising this inn for how good it was. Now that he was in front of him, it was in such a dilapidated state. In front of the inn, there was a withered yellow bamboo pole. On top of the bamboo pole hung a banner made of linen, with the words impermanence of the world written on it. Brother Shua, let's go in. This inn is considered a good one in this area. After Guishan brought Zhuowen to this inn, his warm attitude took a 180-degree turn. Now, the warmth was long gone, replaced by coldness and indifference. Zhuowen did not mind. He followed Guishan into the inn. It had to be said that this inn was really dilapidated. The ground was actually muddy, and there were piles of junk. In addition to the small space inside, the overall experience of this inn was much worse. There were only a few cultivators sitting on the dirty tables and chairs that were casually placed in the hall. Moreover, these cultivators' cultivation levels were very low. Zhuowen discovered that most of them were cultivators who had yet to prove their Tao. In the Xianmi heavenly region, this was the lowest level of existence. After all, the Xianmi heavenly region was different from the 8 heavens. Void sky 9 steps was simply trash here. Anyone could kill them on the streets. Looking at the situation inside, Zhuowen somewhat understood. This inn was the worst in this area, and it should be the cheapest. Otherwise, how could these cultivators who had yet to prove their Tao have the money to stay here? At the front of the counter, a voluptuous woman in a low-cut short skirt leaned, her right hand holding a long smoking pipe, leisurely. Noticing Guishan's arrival, the charming young woman cast him a sidelong glance and casually asked, "Guishan, is there another guest coming to stay?" Guishan chuckled and glanced at the voluptuous woman's proud place. He pointed at Zhuowen behind him and said, "Give this little brother the best room. I remember that the best room you have here should cost 10 high-grade, heavenly Tao origin crystals a night, right?" As soon as Guishan said this, the hand holding the pipe in the voluptuous young woman's hand trembled as a look of surprise flashed across her beautiful eyes. However, she quickly regained her composure and glanced at the white-clothed young man behind Guishan before saying with a charming smile, "Brother Guishan is right. Our best rooms are indeed 10 high-grade, heavenly law origin crystals per night. This little brother obviously comes from a prestigious family, so you must be staying in our best rooms, right?" The voice at the counter was not loud, but it was not soft either. The other cultivators sitting in the hall naturally heard this conversation. These cultivators all secretly shook their heads. Their gazes towards Zhuowen were filled with pity, but none of them said anything. Instead, they quickly left the hall. Zhuowen naturally noticed this strange scene. The sneer on his face deepened as he indifferently said, "I'm not a particular person. The cheapest room is fine." Guishan and the young woman were stunned. They did not expect this brat to disagree with them. The young woman reacted very quickly. She smiled and said, "Little brother, I'm really sorry. All the rooms in our inn are full. Only the best room is still empty." Zhuowen leisurely glanced at the deserted hall and calmly said, "In that case, I'll stay in the best room for 3 nights. Here are 30 high-grade, heavenly Tao origin crystals." Zhuowen very generously took out 30 high-grade, heavenly Tao origin crystals and placed them on the counter, stunning the young woman and Guishan. In particular, Guishan. He had only been probing to see how many high-grade, heavenly Tao origin crystals this brat had on him. Originally, he had thought that this brat would only have a dozen or so high-grade, heavenly Tao origin crystals at most. But now, it seemed that he had greatly underestimated this brat. From the fact that this brat had casually taken out 30 high-grade, heavenly Tao origin crystals, it was clear that this brat had at least 3 digits of high-grade, heavenly Tao origin crystals on him. Thinking of this, Guishan's heart burned even hotter. He knew that this young man was a fat sheep. The young woman was seeing stars. This was definitely the highest number of high-grade, heavenly Tao origin crystals she had ever seen in her life. Her gaze towards Zhuowen had also changed. If it had only been disdain at the beginning, the young woman's eyes were now burning with passion. This young man, before her, was basically a moving treasury. Zhuowen quietly stood where he was. He was waiting for these two to make a move. Once they made a move, Zhuowen would immediately kill them. However, Gui Shan and the young woman suppressed the greed in their hearts. The young woman even smiled as she personally led Zhuowen to the best guest room. "Lady Boss, I heard from Brother Gui Shan that you have first-rate cartography skills. Can you sell me a complete map of the Xian Mi heavenly domain?" After the young woman led Zhuowen to an extremely ordinary guest room, Zhuowen did not mind. Instead, he asked the young woman about the map. The young woman revealed an enchanting smile and said, "Young master, you have found the right person. In terms of cartography skills, I am indeed the best in this area. However, I do not have a complete map of the Xian Mi heavenly domain. I only have a map of the host domain." Zhuowen frowned slightly and said, "Didn't you say that your cartography skills are first-rate? Why can you only create a map of the host domain and not the other domains of the Xian Mi heavenly domain? Can this be considered first-rate?" The young woman was a little embarrassed and explained, "Young master, don't you know? As the host domain, it is common knowledge that we have a map of the host domain. However, the maps of the other domains are usually priceless. They are basically in the hands of the Tao Palace level factions. This is because without the permission of the Tao Palace level factions, it is very difficult to leave and cross domains." "You mean that the complete map of the Xianmi heavenly domain is basically in the hands of the Tao Palace level factions?" Zhuowen was a little surprised. He did not expect the map of the Xianmi heavenly domain to have restrictions. It was really strange. You can say that. After all, the relationships between the various domains are not very good. The Tao Palace level factions do this to prevent spies from entering the domains and causing chaos. Usually, the connection between Tao domains is usually sealed. Only when a major event occurs will the connection between the various Tao domains be opened. For example, the Tao domain tournament that is held once every 10,000 years is a major event for the various Tao domains to showcase their respective geniuses. The seal between the various Tao domains will be opened. Chapter 27:13. Fat Sheep, thank you, Lady Boss. Since you have a map of the host region, can you sell it to me? Zhuowen didn't explain anything to the young woman and went straight to the point. He wanted to buy the map of the host region from the young woman. The young woman smiled. She had already guessed that Zhuowen wanted to buy the host region, which was why she was so enthusiastic before. Especially when she found out that Zhuowen was a fool with a lot of money, the young woman became even more attentive. The young woman's slender fingers gently stroked the necklace in front of her chest. Her movements were very seductive and seductive. Then, a jade slip appeared in the young woman's hand. The jade slip was crystal clear and exquisitely made. It made people's eyes light up. Zhuowen looked at the jade slip in surprise. In his opinion, the map the young woman took out shouldn't be much. Although Zhuowen didn't lack crystal stones, if the map the young woman took out didn't satisfy him, he wouldn't buy it without permission. After all, he wasn't a real fool. "Let me take a look at this map first, then I'll decide whether to buy it or not," Zhuowen said with a smile. The young woman didn't care and handed the jade slip to Zhuowen. She wasn't worried that Zhuowen would take it away. Zhuowen casually scanned it with his divine sense and found that the map drawn in the jade slip was indeed very exquisite. The rough geography of the host region was basically drawn in it. Zhuowen found that the Eastern Path region was very large and there were tens of thousands of Taoist level forces. Each Taoist level force occupied a large area and had their own mountain gate and heavenly Tao dragon vein. They managed countless cultivators and plane worlds. The number of Taoist level forces was much smaller. In the Eastern Path region, there were only 3 digits of Taoist level forces. The territory controlled by Taoist level forces was even larger. Moreover, each Taoist level force had many Taoist level forces attached to it. From the map, Zhuowen found that the Impermanence Palace was one of the Taoist level forces attached to the Huangji family. It was no wonder that when the people from the Huangji aristocratic family came to the pier, the palace master of the Impermanence Palace was so servile and fawning. Above the Tao Palace level, there was a truly hegemonic force, a Tao Palace level force. There were only 5 recognized Tao Palace factions in the entire host region. The map also mentioned that there were some hidden Tao Palace factions in the host region. Of course, whether or not there were hidden Tao Palace factions was only a guess. After all, other than the 5 publicly recognized Tao Palace factions, the other hidden Tao Palace factions rarely moved about in the outside world. These 5 publicly recognized Tao Palace forces were Scarlet Mountain Villa, Fallen Star Mountain Villa, Void Palace, Sun Chasing Temple, and 10 Extreme Corpse Sect. Each of these 5 forces was enough to cause a commotion in the host region. They were deeply rooted and influenced the development of the host region. Zhuowen secretly memorized the names of the 5 Tao palaces before putting away the jade slip. He looked at the young woman and said, "This map of yours is pretty good. What's the price?" The smile on the young woman's face grew even wider. She first bragged about the many precious materials she had used to make this map, as well as the effort she had put into it. In any case, she was just bragging. Zhuowen sneered inwardly. The map was indeed quite exquisite, but it wasn't as exaggerated as the young woman had made it out to be. He knew that the young woman had said this because she wanted to ask for a sky-high price. However, he didn't care. He had a lot of crystals on him, so casually taking out a few hundred high-grade, heavenly law origin crystals was nothing to him. Of course, he had long seen that the young woman and Wind-Gathering Mountain were up to no good. He planned to continue flaunting his wealth in front of these 2 people. He wanted to see if they really dared to make a move on him. In the end, the young woman finally gave a price. "I see that you and I hit it off quite well. Although I paid a huge price to make this map, I'll give you a discount. 500 high-grade heavenly law origin crystals." The young woman's heart thumped wildly when she gave this price. This price far exceeded the price of the map itself. She had never even accepted so many high-grade heavenly law origin crystals before. Although she felt that this young man was foolish and rich, she also knew that the price she gave was far too high. She didn't think that this young man could afford it. Of course, if the young man couldn't, the young woman would naturally continue to lower the price. In any case, she was actually just testing how many high-grade, heavenly law origin crystals Zhuowen had on him. Oh, 500 high-grade, heavenly law origin crystals really aren't expensive. Zhuowen smiled. With a wave of his sleeve, he very naturally took out 500 high-grade, heavenly law origin crystals. The young woman couldn't help but feel a little dizzy as she stared at the white crystals before her. The young woman was truly shocked. She never thought that the young man would really take out 500 high-grade, heavenly law origin crystals. Moreover, from the looks of it, he didn't seem to care at all. Didn't this mean that the young man had far more high-grade, heavenly law origin crystals on him than 500? Thinking of this, the young woman couldn't help but feel a fire burning in her heart. She looked at Zhuowen with a much more fervent gaze. After putting away the 500 high-grade heavenly law origin crystals, the young woman casually chatted with Zhuowen for a while longer before bidding farewell and leaving. Zhuowen closed the door casually, and his enormous spiritual sense did indeed sweep out silently, following the young woman and landing in the hall below. Zhuowen's divine sense was extremely powerful, far more powerful than that of the young woman and Gue Shan. If Zhuowen deliberately concealed his divine sense, the two of them wouldn't have been able to detect that Zhuowen's divine sense had already followed the young woman. The young woman walked down the stairs. Gue Shan was still in the hall, casually sitting at a table. Seeing the young woman come down, he hurriedly stepped forward and asked, how was it? How many crystals did this boy take out to buy the map? The young woman smiled proudly and opened her right palm. Gue Shan took a look and said in surprise, 50 high-grade, heavenly law origin crystals. This boy is really not ordinary. He's willing to spend so much on a map. The young woman smiled slyly and said, "You idiot, it's not 50, it's 500. This boy's wealth is probably far greater than you, and I guessed. It looks like a fat sheep has come this time." 500? Gue Shan was also shocked. Chapter 27:14. Deception. He really is a fat sheep. This fellow is only the heavenly Tao master, yet he actually has so many high-grade, heavenly Tao origin crystals. Could it be that the faction behind him is very powerful? The young woman asked worriedly. Gue Shan also revealed a fearful expression, but he quickly advised, "Don't worry, this kid is all alone, and from the looks of it, he doesn't know anything about the Impermanence Pier. He's clearly not a cultivator from Impermanence Palace. As long as we do things cleanly and don't leave any traces. So what if this kid has a powerful background? Dead men tell no tales, so how can they trace it back to us? Moreover, my big brother is now a Chaos Yuan master and has entered the ranks of Impermanence Palace's core disciples. At the same time, he has a good relationship with Impermanence Palace's second young master. My big brother can easily suppress this matter." When she heard Gue Shan mention his big brother, the young woman's beautiful eyes rippled with a strange light. The young woman's cultivation was the same as Gue Shan's, Dao Yuan master, but the difference was that she had broken through on her own, while Gue Shan's talent was not strong, and he had relied on resources. Furthermore, with Gue Shan's talent, he did not have the qualifications to become the Impermanence Pier's manager, but because of his big brother's words, he smoothly became the Impermanence Pier's manager. It was clear to see just how influential Gue Shan's big brother was in Impermanence Palace. The reason the young woman was so fawning over Gue Shan was partly because of Gue Shan's big brother's deterrence. Otherwise, how could the young woman be so courteous to Gue Shan? After all, in terms of strength, the young woman could kill Gue Shan in a few moves, but she did not dare, so she could only curry favor with him. If Big Brother Gue Yuan is above us, we really have nothing to fear. Big Brother Gue Shan, when do you plan to act? The young woman looked at Gue Shan with her beautiful eyes and asked coquettishly. Gue Shan rubbed himself against the young woman's body, causing the young woman to blush before coldly laughing, "Let's do it tomorrow, but we can't do it near the docks. We'll lure him to the wasteland in the west and kill him without anyone knowing." The young woman nodded in agreement. At the same time, she praised Gue Shan, causing him to squint his eyes in pleasure. Zhuowen sat cross-legged on the bed. His spiritual awareness was indeed lingering around the man and woman downstairs, who were scheming something. A disdainful smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. These two people were really planning to target Zhuowen. However, Zhuowen didn't care about this at all. However, Zhuowen was a little surprised that Gue Shan actually had a big brother. This big brother was a core disciple of Impermanence Palace. It seemed like this fella had some connections. The young woman and wind-gathering mountains words were somewhat unsightly, so Zhuowen withdrew his divine sense and began to carefully study the map that the young woman had given him. Although this young woman had the heart of a snake and scorpion, the map she drew could not be faked. The markings on the map were also quite detailed. Zhuowen quickly found the location of Purple Red House on the map. He had just arrived in Xianmi Heavenly Domain, so the only things he knew about Purple Red House were its fire plume and steel plume. Moreover, the two of them had invited Zhuowen to visit their forces. This time, he naturally wanted to visit Purple Red House. Of course, Zhuowen mainly wanted to learn more about Xianmi Heavenly Domain from Fire Plume and Si Tong Chime. While he was at it, the map of the host territory was very large. Zhuowen was so engrossed in it that he forgot to eat and sleep. Before he knew it, a day had passed. It wasn't until there was a knock on the door that Zhuowen recovered. He put away the jade slip and opened the door to see the young woman standing outside with a smile. "Lady Boss, what's the matter?" Zhuowen asked lightly. The young woman smiled charmingly and said, "Young lord, there is a tribe in the west that is holding a gathering. It is said that many rare treasures will appear at this gathering. It is a rare opportunity. Would young lord be willing to go with little he? Oh, will there be second step Tao confirming divine medicines?" Zhuowen asked curiously. The young woman's smile stiffened. After cursing Zhuowen in her heart for being so careless, she still smiled and said, "I heard that second step Tao confirming divine medicines might appear. There will even be many second step Tao confirming powerhouses there. Maybe you can trade for the things you need from those powerhouses?" Zhuowen showed an interested look and said, "In that case, I will have to trouble Lady Boss." The young woman smiled and said, "Young lord, don't call me Lady Boss. When you call me Lady Boss, it makes me sound old. Just call me Big Sister He." "Then I will have to trouble Big Sister He." Zhuowen nodded. After walking out of the inn, Zhuowen found that the sky outside was already dark. The young woman held a lantern in her right hand and beckoned Zhuowen to go to the west. The environment of the Xianmi Heavenly Domain was very similar to that of Earth. They both had day and night, but the day and night in the Xianmi Heavenly Domain were very long. One day was equivalent to 10 days on Earth. Of course, for cultivators, 1 day and 10 days were no different. After all, there was no time in cultivation. For cultivators, the most important thing was to make breakthroughs. As long as they kept making breakthroughs, their lifespan would increase by several times. Moreover, it was unknown whether the laws of the Xianmi Heavenly Domain were much stronger than those of the 8 major heavenly domains, but in the Xianmi Heavenly Domain at night, there was a bone-chilling coldness. This coldness reminded Zhuowen of the time when he was still immortal, the feeling of traveling at night on Earth. On the way, the young woman chatted with Zhuowen casually at first, but as they went deeper and deeper, the young woman stopped talking and just silently led the way. Zhuowen silently followed behind the young woman and found that the surrounding environment was getting more and more remote. The coldness of the night was also getting worse and worse. It invaded the body and made people tremble. Finally, the two of them came to an incomparably dark, small bamboo forest, and the young woman stopped in front of them. Zhuowen also stopped and pretended to be puzzled. "Sister He, how can there be a market here? It's so remote. Did you bring us to the wrong place?" "He, little brother, I have to say, you're really simple. How did a simple cultivator like you survive until now?" The young woman held the lantern and slowly turned around. Her beautiful eyes were filled with cold light as she stared coldly at Zhuowen. "Sister He, I don't understand what you're saying." Zhuowen still pretended to be confused. What Xiao He means is if you don't want to die hand over the ring on your body. Perhaps we'll be merciful and let you live." A cold voice came from behind Zhuowen. Then Zhuowen turned around and looked at the skinny man behind him in surprise. "Guishan, you're lying to me. Are you planning to rob me?" Zhuowen came to a sudden realization. Guishan looked at the look of surprise on Zhuowen's face and felt extremely satisfied in his heart. He proudly said, "You're right, we shouldn't show off our wealth. Who told you to be such an idiot and let us see so many crystal stones? If you know what's good for you, hurry up and hand over the ring." As Guishan spoke, the killing intent in his eyes was no longer concealed. Chapter 27:15. Must kill. Will you really let me live if I hand over the ring? Zhuowen seemed to be afraid. "Of course," Guishan said proudly. "Then I'll give you the ring." Zhuowen took off the ring on his finger without hesitation and tossed it to Guishan. Guishan was stunned, and then he put the ring away and roared with laughter. His laughter was filled with disdain as he said, "What a spineless fellow! You've surrendered so quickly. In order to reward you, I've decided to take your life." Guishan wasn't in a hurry to check the ring. Instead, he kicked off the ground with his right foot and charged at Zhuowen like a ferocious tiger. He had unknowingly pulled out a large blade that glowed with a cold light, and he aimed it at Zhuowen's forehead. "You're not keeping your word." Zhuowen's expression changed drastically. Guishan revealed a look of disdain and said, "Keeping my word? There's no such thing in my dictionary. Only an idiot like you would believe my words." On the other side, the young woman exhaled a cloud of smoke as she looked at Zhuowen's back. She secretly shook her head. She felt that this young man was far too naive, and even she couldn't bear to continue watching. "This kind of fellow will die sooner or later. He'll suffer less pain if he dies earlier," the young woman muttered to herself. Clang! Guishan's blade slashed at Zhuowen's forehead, and then the sound of metal clashing resounded. Guishan watched in shock as his blade didn't cut through Zhuowen's forehead. Instead, it was repelled by Zhuowen's forehead. Guishan grunted as he stared at this scene in disbelief. He had used all his strength in that attack, and its power was extraordinary. Even if Dao Yuan Master stood there and allowed himself to be struck, he would still die, let alone a mere heavenly Dao Master. However, this young man before him didn't move at all. His blade was actually unharmed when it struck the young man's forehead. Instead, it was Guishan who was pushed back by the repelling force, and he had already suffered some internal injuries. Guishan was stunned. Not far away, the young woman who was puffing out smoke was also stunned. They felt that this scene was too strange. After all, Guishan was a Dao Yuan master. Although he was a mediocre person who relied on resources, the power of his full-powered saber was not ordinary. Even if she stood in place and let Guishan slash her, she would still be severely injured. However, this young man, who was merely the heavenly Dao master, seemed to be completely unharmed, while Guishan had been reduced to such a sorry state by the backlash. Guishan refused to give up and picked up his large saber again. He once again charged towards Zhuowen, unleashing 10 or so saber images in the blink of an eye. They looked incredibly powerful and dazzling. Unfortunately, every slash was like a tickle to Zhuowen, unable to cause even the slightest bit of damage. This Guishan was terrified. He finally realized that something was amiss. This young man's physical body was far too terrifying. His weapon was a primordial Dao-grade divine artifact, yet it couldn't even leave a scratch on this young man's body. Zhuowen grinned at Guishan and said, "Have you slashed enough?" Guishan was so frightened that he sat on the ground. He stared at Zhuowen, his soul almost leaving his body. This young man was simply pretending to be a pig to eat a tiger. He was obviously so powerful, yet he pretended to be afraid. The young woman also realized that something was wrong. She was extremely decisive. She stomped her foot and fled into the depths of the bamboo forest. She knew that she had hit a wall this time. This young man, who seemed to be a heavenly Tao master, was actually a hidden expert. Do you think you can escape? Zhuowen looked at the young woman who had decisively fled and sneered. His right hand made a grabbing motion in the air. A terrifying energy condensed into an invisible hand and instantly rushed into the depths of the bamboo forest. With a scream, the young woman was grabbed by the invisible hand and violently thrown in front of Zhuowen. She spat out a mouthful of blood and was so severely injured that she couldn't get up. Zhuowen didn't use the power of the Panga's sacred body just now. He used the power of the heavenly Tao master. It had to be said that Zhuowen's power as a heavenly Tao master was beyond his imagination. Just the power of that move alone was enough to match the power of an ordinary Hunyuan master. Gui Shan was scared out of his wits. He also wanted to escape. Unfortunately, Zhuowen's casual slap immediately left Gui Shan half dead. He was thrown to the side of the young woman by Zhuowen. "Don't kill me. I am Gui Yuan's younger brother. My elder brother, Gui Yuan, is a core disciple of Annika Palace. If you kill me, you won't be able to bear the consequences," Gui Shan hurriedly said. Unfortunately, as soon as Gui Shan finished speaking, Zhuowen stepped on his head and took back both his and the young woman's rings. "I even killed Prince Annika. Why would I care about a small fry like you?" Zhuowen sneered. With a flick of his right hand, a terrifying energy turned into a spiral and sank into Gui Shan's glabella. When Gui Shan heard that Prince Annika was killed by Zhuowen, he was already stunned. He didn't even notice Zhuowen's killing move, and was killed in one blow. The young woman trembled. She was filled with regret. If she knew that the young man in front of her was so terrifying, she wouldn't have tried to kill him, especially when he admitted that he was the one who killed Prince Annika. This made the young woman even more frightened. Everyone in the territory of Annika Palace knew about Prince Annika's death. Even the palace master of Annika Palace, Fu Qi, had begun to choose a new successor. Of course, in order to find the real murderer, Fu Qi had even alerted the Huangji family. This kind of sensational matter had already caused a huge uproar. Many people were guessing who had the audacity to kill Prince Annika. The young woman didn't expect that the murderer that everyone was talking about was now in front of her. Moreover, she was planning to rob such a ruthless person. "You can come with me." Zhuowen waved his sleeve and a flame swept out, enveloping the young woman and Gui Shan. Soon, the two of them were turned into ashes. After dealing with the two of them, Zhuowen left the place. He planned to leave the territory of Annika Palace and head to the Purple-Red Chamber. The territory of the Purple-Red Chamber was controlled by another Tao palace. This faction was called the Thunder God's Garden. It was said that it was a powerful faction that controlled the power of divine lightning. Moreover, the Thunder God's Garden was very far from the Huangji family. If Zhuowen wanted to go to the Thunder God's Garden, he would have to use a teleportation array. The teleportation array between Tao palaces was controlled by Tao palaces. Therefore, if Zhuowen wanted to go to the Thunder God's Garden, he would have to enter the capital of the Huangji family. Only the Huangji family had such an ancient teleportation array. Moreover, it was said that the cost was not cheap. In the core disciples' room of Annika Palace, a man with a long sword on his back suddenly opened his eyes. His eyes were bloodshot as he spat out a mouthful of blood. "Who killed my brother Gui Shan? A debt of blood must be paid with blood." The man with the long sword on his back suddenly stood up. A terrifying sword energy swept out like a storm, and the place he was in was turned into ruins. The man with the long sword on his back was one of the core disciples of Anika Palace, Gui Yuan. He was also Gui Shan's elder brother. He and Gui Shan had depended on each other for survival since they were young. There was a faint connection between their bloodlines. Moreover, the two of them had a very good relationship. When Gui Shan was killed, Gui Yuan felt a heartache. He knew that Gui Yuan must have been killed. Otherwise, he wouldn't have felt this way. Chapter 27:16. 3-star peak. Gui Yuan, are you crazy? How could you cause such a big commotion? You even destroyed a disciples' cave residence. A yellow-robed young man stood out from the crowd of disciples who had gathered. He frowned slightly as he looked at the damage caused by Gui Yuan and spoke with slight displeasure. The aura of this young man in a yellow shirt was extremely strong, even stronger than Gui Yuan's. When the young man in a yellow shirt spoke, the surrounding people lowered their voices and looked at the young man in a yellow shirt with a mixture of fear and respect. Even Ping Han is alarmed. Gui Yuan caused a big commotion. Although Ping Han is the most talented and powerful core disciple of Impermanence Palace, Gui Yuan is a rising star and a dark horse with endless potential. Ping Han still values Gui Yuan. That's right. Ping Han is the strongest disciple of Impermanence Palace. Coupled with the fall of Impermanence Palace, the successor of Impermanence Palace is Ping Han. Gui Yuan's talent is also one of the best. In the future, he will definitely become a core member of Impermanence Palace. Ping Han is trying to win Gui Yuan over to pave the way for him to succeed Impermanence Palace in the future. It seems that Ping Han is here to help Gui Yuan suppress this storm. After all, a core disciples' cave residence was personally approved by the palace master. Gui Yuan will inevitably be punished for his reckless actions. However, with Ping Han's help, Gui Yuan will be able to avoid this punishment. The surrounding people discussed animatedly as they looked at Gui Yuan with envy and jealousy. As the #1 core disciple, Ping Han's popularity and prestige were very high among the core disciples. For Gui Yuan to be able to receive special treatment from Ping Han, it was something worthy of envy for the other core disciples. Gui Yuan's eyes were cold, but his heart was filled with sadness and anger. Gui Yuan cupped his hands towards Ping Han and said in a low voice, "Senior brother Ping Han, my younger brother Gui Shan was killed. I must take revenge. Otherwise, it will have a great impact on my breakthrough to the second step of Dao validation." Ping Han frowned slightly. He had heard of Gui Yuan's younger brother, Gui Shan. He knew that Gui Shan's talent was very poor. His cultivation base had been forcefully raised by the precious divine pills that Gui Yuan had given him. His strength was much weaker than an ordinary Dao origin master. He might only be slightly stronger than the heavenly Dao master. In Ping Han's eyes, Gui Shan was a complete and utter trash. He did not place Gui Shan in his eyes. However, he had no choice but to pay attention to a genius like Gui Yuan. Although he did not like Gui Shan, he was still Gui Yuan's younger brother. Now that Gui Shan was dead, if he did not express his gratitude, Gui Yuan's heart would probably turn cold. Gui Shan is still a disciple of our Impermanence Palace. Killing a disciple of our Impermanence Palace is the same as slapping our face and going against us. Ping Han's gaze was calm. He looked at Gui Yuan and said, "Gui Yuan, since Gui Shan is your younger brother, I will go with you to investigate this matter." Gui Yuan's eyes revealed joy, and he hurriedly bowed and said, "Many thanks, senior apprentice, brother Ping Han." Ping Han waved his hand and said, "We're all fellow apprentices. It's only right that we help each other." The surrounding core disciples all revealed looks of envy and jealousy. They felt that Ping Han was giving Gui Yuan too special treatment. Zhuowen sat cross-legged on the space-time roulette and rushed towards the Huangji clan's capital city. Because he had obtained a map of the entire host domain, Zhuowen clearly knew the specific direction of the Huangji clan. It had to be said that the Xianmi heavenly region was extremely vast. Just the distance between the Impermanence Palace and the Huangji clan, Zhuowen estimated that it would take a month. One had to know that the space-time roulette's speed had increased greatly after fusing with the blue light from the space-time temple. According to Zhuowen's estimation, the space-time roulette's speed was definitely faster than some second-step Dao confirming experts. One had to know that Kong Shi was an eternal overlord. Even Kong Shi's speed was far inferior to the space-time roulette. It could be seen how terrifying the speed of the evolved space-time roulette was. With the space-time roulette's current speed, it would take a month to travel from the Impermanence Palace to the Huangji clan's capital city. It could be seen how vast the two regions were. The distance between the Impermanence Palace and the Huangji clan's capital city was simply insignificant compared to the vast territory of the host domain. It was not worth mentioning. After Zhuowen told Xiaohe the route, he became a hands-off shopkeeper. Xiaohe had already come out of seclusion a few days ago. This guy's progress was very fast. Even Zhuowen felt a little dumbfounded because this guy had actually advanced to the primordial grade divine tool. On the day that Xiaohe came out of seclusion, he showed off in front of Zhuowen and was very proud of himself. Unfortunately, Zhuowen sent this guy flying with a slap. This made Xiaohe feel the power of the Pangu's sacred body. Since that day, Xiaohe no longer dared to show off in front of Zhuowen, because once he showed off, he would be mercilessly slapped in the face by Zhuowen. Not only had Xiaohe made great progress, but Xiaohe had also trained the Blood Immortal Sword and the Death Sacrifice Sword very well. Both of them had advanced to the primordial grade divine tool. This showed how abundant the resources Zhuowen had obtained in the space-time temple. Zhuowen was in seclusion on the space-time roulette. He planned to continue absorbing the special class Heavenly Path origin crystals during this month. He wanted to use this to advance his Pangu's sacred body to the peak of the 3-star realm. Previously, because his original body had caused too much of a commotion by absorbing the special class Heavenly Path origin crystals, his doppelganger was forced to stop absorbing the special class Heavenly Path origin crystals and only reached the 3-star realm. Now that his original body had successfully broken through to the Heavenly Path Master, and there were many special class Heavenly Path origin crystals in the great world, Zhuowen naturally would not waste such an opportunity to break through. Time flew, and a month passed quickly. Zhuowen slowly opened his eyes. His expression was calm, but the aura in his body swept out like a storm. Creak, creak. Zhuowen slowly stood up, and then he found that the entire space-time roulette was trembling violently. It was as if it could not withstand his movements and would fall at any time. Xiaohe cursed and hurriedly controlled the space-time roulette. Only then did he manage to control the space-time roulette so that it would not sway and fly normally. Boy, your Pangu's sacred body has broken through again. After Xiaohe controlled the space-time roulette, he diverted his attention to Zhuowen and asked in surprise. Zhuowen smiled and said, "Yes, I was lucky to break through to the peak of the 3-star realm." What a freak. This Pangu's sacred body is too terrifying. Just now, you just stood up, and the space-time roulette seemed to be unable to withstand your weight and was about to fall. Fortunately, I brilliantly controlled the space-time roulette. Chapter 27:17. Blocking the Wei Zhuowen shook his head. The reason why the space-time roulette had almost gone out of control was that Zhuowen had just broken through and was unable to fully control the power of the 3-star peak Pangu's sacred body. The power of the Pangu's sacred body was extremely terrifying. After breaking through to the 3-star peak, it was enough to defeat any first-step Dao validation expert. He could even challenge a second-step Tao validation expert. Of course, Zhuowen had already adapted to the power of the three-star peak Panga sacred body, so he was able to completely control the power of the Panga sacred body and prevent it from leaking out. "Kid, we're almost at the capital of the Huangji clan," Xiao He suddenly said. Zhuowen raised his head and looked into the distance. He saw a gigantic city in the distance. The city was too big. Its surface was overflowing with colors, and it was dazzling. It was as if the city was built with countless luxury goods. Zhuowen knew that the reason the city was so dazzling was because there were many formations and restrictions on the surface of the city. It could be said that 50% of the city was formed by formations and restrictions. With Zhuowen's current level of formation Tao, he could tell at a glance that the formations and restrictions on the city were eternal level formations. Moreover, it was not just one formation, but a combination of many formations. It could be said that such a terrifying city was enough to make eternal overlords unable to leave. Zhuowen's gaze turned grave. This Huangji aristocratic family actually controlled such an incomparably terrifying gigantic city, while Zhuowen had killed the heir of Huangji aristocratic family, and an existence like Grandmaster Yuan Hui. It could be said that he had formed an irreconcilable feud with the Huangji clan. If the Huangji clan knew that Zhuowen was the murderer and that Zhuowen was now entering the city, he would be courting death. Of course, Zhuowen knew that the Huangji clan did not know that Zhuowen was the real murderer. However, Zhuowen was a little worried. He thought of the expert from the Huangji clan at the impermanence dock. This expert must have gone to the eight heavens to investigate the cause of death of Huang Zhe and Master Yuan Hui. Although Zhuowen was very confident that he had completely destroyed the corpse and left no traces behind, the Huangji clan was a Tao Palace-level force after all. It had a deep foundation, and was definitely not something an ordinary force could compare to. Perhaps this kind of power might have some kind of inconceivable method to find the murderer. Then Zhuowen would be in a bad situation. Although Zhuowen felt that the possibility of this happening was not high, he had an ominous feeling in his heart. The closer he got to the capital city, the faster his heart raced. It was as if it was reminding him to leave as soon as possible. This was a dangerous place. Zhuowen trusted his intuition. After all, at Zhuowen's level of cultivation, he had the instinct to know his destiny. He could foresee the past, the future, and his own fate in advance. Once we enter the capital city, we should leave as soon as possible. Zhuowen made up his mind. However, when he was about 10,000 meters away from the capital city, Zhuowen stopped the space-time roulette. This was because someone was blocking the path of his space-time roulette. What blocked Zhuowen's path was a huge flying divine weapon. This flying divine weapon looked like a lantern and was very large. At the top of the lantern was a large deck. At that moment, 4 figures were standing on the deck. The auras of these 4 figures were very powerful. They were all at the Hunyuan master level. This was especially true for the yellow-robed young man, who was closer to the front. His aura was the strongest, and his cultivation was at least at the peak of the Hunyuan master level. He was very close to the second step Tao validation. Zhuowen stopped the space-time roulette and looked coldly at the 4 people on the deck of the flying divine weapon. He asked indifferently, "Why are the 4 of you blocking my path?" Next to the yellow-robed young man, a young man with a long sword on his back took a step forward. With a flick of his finger, an image condensed above his fingertip. He asked, "Do you know the person in this image?" Zhuowen narrowed his eyes. The image that the young man with a sword had taken out was not unfamiliar to Zhuowen. It was the image of Guishan, who he had killed. Moreover, Zhuowen realized that the young man with a sword in front of him was somewhat similar to Guishan. It seemed that this person had a close relationship with Gui Shan. Zhuowen said without hesitation, "I don't know him. If you're stopping me just to ask this, you can move aside. Don't block the way." Zhuowen's words were very rude. The four people on the deck all revealed displeased expressions. Even the yellow-clothed young man with the best self-restraint frowned slightly. The young man with a sword was Gui Yuan. At that moment, when he heard Zhuowen's rude words, he was so angry that his whole body trembled. "You want to act shamelessly? Actually, you're the murderer," Gui Yuan said coldly, not hiding the killing intent in his eyes. Zhuowen's gaze was cold as he said, "I say, brother, you're already in the wrong for blocking me. Now, you're indiscriminately slandering me as the murderer. Do you think I'm easy to bully?" Gui Yuan was so angry that he wanted to kill someone. He directly drew his sword, certain that Zhuowen was the murderer. However, he was stopped by the yellow-robed young man. Although Gui Yuan was furious, he was still respectful towards the yellow-robed man. At this moment, the yellow-robed young man stopped him. He also put down the sword in his hand, but his gaze towards Zhuowen was still filled with killing intent. The yellow-robed young man smiled at Zhuowen and said, "Brother, I haven't asked for your name yet. What sect are you from?" Zhuowen looked at the smiling young man in front of him and shrugged. "My name is Zhuowen. I don't belong to any sect. I'm just a rogue cultivator." "I see. My name is Ping Han. These three are my junior brothers, and I'm a disciple of Anika Palace." The yellow-robed young man was still smiling. In fact, when he saw that Zhuowen was just a heavenly path master, he was a little surprised. He even suspected that the young man in front of him had the strength to kill Gui Shan. Although Gui Shan was just a good-for-nothing in the eyes of the yellow-robed young man, he was still a Dao Yuan master. Even if he was much weaker than the average Dao Yuan master, he was still stronger than the heavenly path master. Although it was not impossible for a heavenly path master to kill a Dao Yuan master, those were geniuses from sects and clans. It was even said that the true monsters could kill people who were an entire realm above them. However, such geniuses were too rare. Basically, only Dao Palace level forces had such geniuses. Of course, powerful Dao Palace level forces also had such geniuses. Such geniuses were enough to be called peerless monsters. Actually, we don't want to casually suspect people, but I heard that before Gui Shan died, you seemed to be the last person he came into contact with. However, you denied knowing Gui Shan. Sir, shouldn't you give us an explanation as to why you would lie? Chapter 27:18. Ping Hanzhuan narrowed his eyes. He didn't expect these people to be from the Impermanence Palace. In fact, when he saw Gui Yuan, Zhuowen had already guessed his identity. Before the young woman died, she had said that Gui Shan's identity wasn't ordinary, and that he had a big brother who was said to be a core disciple of the Impermanence Palace. Zhuowen guessed that the young man with the sword in front of him was Gui Shan's cheap big brother. However, what Zhuowen did not understand was how these four people had caught up to him so quickly and were actually able to block his path in advance. One had to know that the space-time roulette under Zhuowen's feet was unparalleled in the world. No matter how extraordinary these four people's identities were, they couldn't have a divine tool that was faster than the space-time roulette. Regarding this, Zhuowen was still very confident. However, these four people just so happened to arrive before him and block his path. After all, these four people were chasing after Zhuowen, so they would definitely investigate first. This would take a lot of time, and it would be even more impossible for them to catch up to Zhuowen. In fact, what Zhuowen didn't know was that the Impermanence Palace was a subordinate force of the Huangji family. They had a teleportation array that led directly to the Huangji family. Of course, this teleportation array wasn't open to the public and was only open to important people of the Impermanence Palace. Originally, with Gui Yuan's identity, it was impossible for him to use this teleportation array. However, they had benefited from Ping Han. Ping Han had been appointed as the next palace master of the Impermanence Palace by Fu Qi. His authority had long surpassed that of a core disciple, and he was on equal footing with the elders of the Impermanence Palace. Naturally, he had the authority to use this teleportation array. It was because of this teleportation array that they were able to arrive at the Huangji family in advance and wait outside for Zhuowen's arrival after completing their investigation. Of course, the person who guessed that Zhuowen would come to the Huangji family's capital was Ping Han. In his opinion, Gui Shan was a member of the Impermanence Palace after all. After killing Gui Shan, the murderer would definitely be afraid of the revenge of the Impermanence Palace. At that time, he wouldn't dare to stay in the Huangji family's territory and would use the teleportation array to leave. Ping Han's guess was by chance, but the result was the same. They finally waited for Zhuowen. "Why aren't you saying anything? Are you so guilty that you don't dare to speak?" Gui Yuan said rudely, and the killing intent in his eyes became even more piercingly cold. Zhuowen was very unhappy in his heart. He was blocked by these four people for no reason, and this Gui Yuan even revealed a strong killing intent towards him. "I just don't want to talk. The four of you are here to cause trouble. No matter what I say, will you believe me?" Zhuowen said coldly. Gui Yuan laughed and said, "Believe? Why would I believe that? No matter if you admit it or deny it, you will die today. Even if you weren't the one who killed my brother, you still have to die and be buried with him." As he spoke, Gui Yuan took a step forward. His right hand pinched the fingers of a sword as he chanted a sword technique. Then, the divine sword on his back unsheathed and shot out like a bolt of lightning towards Zhuowen. Gui Yuan followed closely behind. He clenched his right hand into a fist and fiercely punched out. The surface of his fist was filled with terrifying energy. A single punch could probably annihilate anything. Obviously, Gui Yuan didn't hold back at all this time. He came with the goal of killing Zhuowen. Even Lord Hunyuan, who was at the same level as him, probably wouldn't dare to casually take this sword and fist attack head-on. Ping Han stood on the spot. This time, he didn't stop Gui Yuan. He could feel the terrifying anger in Gui Yuan's heart. If he stopped him again, Gui Yuan's impression of him would probably be greatly reduced. Moreover, this white-clothed young man was indeed very suspicious. Although this white-clothed young man's cultivation was slightly low and the possibility of him killing Gui Shan wasn't high, Gui Shan's death was definitely related to this guy. If he died, then so be it. It could be considered as revenge for Gui Shan. The other two core disciples behind Ping Han crossed their arms and looked at Zhuowen mockingly. They were very clear about Gui Yuan's strength. He had the absolute upper hand against Lord Hunyuan, let alone now that he was only facing the heavenly lawmaster. Moreover, he was using his full strength. Obviously, this white-clothed young man was doomed, and his death would definitely be extremely miserable. Zhuowen silently looked at the sword and fist attack that were flying towards him. He calmly stood on the spot, motionless. In Gui Yuan's eyes, Zhuowen's action was a performance of being scared silly. This made Gui Yuan despise him. Ding! When the divine sword pierced through the air and landed in front of Zhuowen's eyes like a meteor, it was repelled by a force. It actually deviated a few centimeters from Zhuowen's ear and directly swept past. However, Zhuowen was completely unharmed. What? Gui Yuan's pupils shrank and revealed a shocked expression. Only then did he realize that the thing that repelled his divine sword was also a divine sword. However, this divine sword was surrounded by terrifying lightning and fire energy. At a glance, one could tell that it wasn't an ordinary sword. Zhuowen still stood on the spot, but the Thunderfire sword had already shot out and swept towards Gui Yuan's fist. Although Gui Yuan was shocked, he didn't care too much. He was very confident in his fist. Moreover, the young man in front of him was only the heavenly Tao master. Although the Thunderfire sword was extraordinary, how much power could it unleash in the hands of this person? Puchi. Unfortunately, Gui Yuan's idea was completely wrong. The moment his fist collided with the Thunderfire sword, a large amount of blood immediately spurted out. The Thunderfire sword pierced through Gui Yuan's fist without any obstruction, as if it was tofu. Moreover, it drilled out of Gui Yuan's shoulder, and Gui Yuan's entire right hand exploded into a bloody mist. Gui Yuan screamed miserably as he held his right arm that had already exploded and immediately retreated. Unfortunately, the Thunderfire sword's speed was too fast. The moment it exploded Gui Yuan's right arm, it turned back and directly pierced into Gui Yuan's forehead. The lightning and fire energy exploded, and Gui Yuan's head exploded. Even his soul was completely annihilated. The battle between the Thunderfire sword and Gui Yuan was too short. It was only a breath of time. When Gui Yuan was killed by the Thunderfire sword, Ping Han and the other two completely reacted. Gui Yuan died just like that. The two people behind Ping Han muttered with their mouths wide open. Ping Han was also stunned for a moment. However, when he came back to his senses, he flew into a rage. He shouted at Zhuowen, "How dare you kill my Impermanence Palace's people?" Zhuowen's gaze was calm as he looked at Ping Han and said, "You brought people to kill me. Why can't I kill your Impermanence Palace's people? Could it be that only you are allowed to kill me, and I'm not allowed to kill you back?" Ping Han's expression was ugly as he said, "Good, very good. You have to pay the price for killing my Impermanence Palace's people." With that said, Ping Han said to the two people behind him, "Attack together and destroy this person." The two people behind Ping Han hesitated, but they did not dare to disobey Ping Han's order. They followed behind Ping Han and rushed towards Zhuowen, forming a triangle. Although Ping Han looked down on Zhuowen in his words, his actions were extremely cautious, especially towards the Thunderfire sword manifested by Xiao He. This Thunderfire sword could instantly kill Gui Yuan, so it definitely had the strength of a peak Impermanence Palace master. Ping Han did not dare to be careless in the face of such a terrifying divine weapon. As for Zhuowen, Ping Han had already subconsciously ignored him. Zhuowen's aura was too weak. He was only a heavenly Tao master. Chapter 27:19. Ping Han's killing intent whoosh. 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 Ping Han acted decisively, and the two youths behind him followed closely behind. They were like arrows leaving the bow, and their speed was extremely fast. The moment Ping Han made his move, Zhuowen could clearly feel the surrounding temperature plummeting. In an instant, the surrounding air seemed to have solidified, and the cold air was bone-chilling. Bang! The Thunderfire sword, which was originally flying out, suddenly froze in midair. It was as if there was an invisible wall blocking the Thunderfire sword in the transparent void. Zhuowen squinted his eyes. He saw that in the radius of a few feet around the Thunderfire sword, there was a dense ice line that formed an ice barrier. It was this barrier that blocked the Thunderfire sword. Ping Han's mouth revealed a mocking smile. He stomped his right foot and arrived in front of the ice barrier. He clenched his right fist, and the cold air was biting cold. Immediately after, he smashed it. Bang! 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 The sound of bamboo exploding rang out. Ping Han's fist had surpassed the speed of sound, and the sound of the air exploding rolled out like thunder. Clang! Ping Han's fist smashed onto the Thunderfire sword, and the Thunderfire sword was actually sent flying. However, the Thunderfire sword was trapped in the ice barrier. Therefore, the moment the Thunderfire sword was hit, it was immediately smashed to the edge of the ice barrier and bounced back. Immediately after, Ping Han's second punch came, and the Thunderfire sword was still smashed to pieces. On the hilt of the Thunderfire sword, Xiao Hei's shadow appeared. Xiao Hei was flustered and exasperated. He stared at Ping Han and said loudly, "Little bastard, you have angered this dragon lord. Today I will kill you, extract your divine soul, and piss on your divine soul every day. I will let you know the consequences of angering this dragon lord." Xiao Hei's words were too despicable, and even Ping Han was greatly angered. He did not expect the weapon spirit of the divine sword in front of him to be so arrogant. He simply did not put him in his eyes. As expected, like master, like servant, a little weapon spirit dares to be so arrogant. Let's see how you will regret it when I catch you. Ping Han snorted and smashed out another punch. The speed of the punch was faster than before, and it was several times faster than the speed of sound. It was extremely powerful and extraordinary. Studio. The ice barrier's trembling didn't last for long. Terrifying cracks actually appeared on its surface. In the end, the ice barrier shattered and collapsed. The terrifying lightning and fire energy inside was like a raging dragon erupting. At this moment, Ping Han's attack had yet to arrive. Seeing the Thunderfire energy shooting towards him, his expression changed greatly. However, because the arrow was already knocked, he could only brace himself and face the terrifying Thunderfire energy head-on. Bang! Ping Han groaned and kept retreating. He looked at Xiao Hei in shock. Obviously, Xiao Hei's strength was still beyond his imagination. She actually broke through his enchantment. She was not simple at all. It's just an artifact spirit. Although it has some strength, how strong can it be? Ping Han snorted coldly. He was not discouraged at all. Instead, he erupted with the most powerful strength in his body and began to attack Xiao Hei without any regard for his life. The two disciples behind Ping Han also followed closely behind. They used all of their skills to help Ping Han counterattack Xiao Hei. Ping Han was worthy of being the #1 core disciple of Impermanence Palace. His cultivation was infinitely close to the second step of Tao validation. His strength was even stronger than the average peak primordial chaos master. Furthermore, Ping Han possessed a lot of abilities. If he were to unleash his full strength, he would be on par with Xiao Hei. However, Ping Han had the help of his two junior brothers, so he was able to suppress Xiao Hei in one fell swoop. Even though Xiao Hei was cursing, Ping Han still had no intention of fighting Xiao Hei alone. Of course, Xiao Hei's curses were too harsh. She had almost cursed 18 generations of Ping Han's ancestors. Although Ping Han had good self-restraint, after hearing Xiao Hei's obscenities, he was still speechless. He wanted nothing more than to tear this artifact spirit's mouth apart and make him shut up quickly. Zhuowen stood aside, silently, and watched the battle. He did not intend to take action. The reason why he did not take action was that he wanted to see Xiao Hei's results during this period. Previously, Xiao Hei had shamelessly asked for 30% of the resources that Zhuowen had obtained from the Temporal Temple. With so many resources, how strong had Xiao Hei become? Now that he was watching the battle, Zhuowen had a deeper understanding of Xiao Hei's strength. Currently, Xiao Hei's strength should be stronger than an ordinary peak primordial chaos master, and should be on par with Ping Han. If Xiao Hei could obtain more materials, Zhuowen believed that this guy would have more than enough to enter the second step of Tao validation. However, he also knew that Xiao Hei would definitely need to consume a lot of resources to advance to the second step of Tao validation. The amount of resources needed would definitely be dozens of times more than what Xiao Hei had used to advance to the second step of Tao validation. At this moment, Ping Han was very proud. He had completely suppressed this artifact spirit. According to his estimation, this abominable artifact spirit should be defeated within 100 moves. When the time came for him to capture this artifact spirit, he would give this artifact spirit special treatment. At the same time, Ping Han's gaze fell on the young man in white who was watching the battle not far away. He wanted to see the look of shock and fear on the young man's face. In Ping Han's opinion, the Thunderfire Sword was the strongest trump card of the young man in white. Since he was about to capture the Thunderfire Sword, what else could the young man rely on? When the time came, he would be at Ping Han's disposal. However, the moment Ping Han's gaze fell on the young man in white, he frowned slightly. This was because he saw that the young man in white did not look as frightened as he had expected. The young man in white's face was extremely calm from beginning to end. He was like a pool of water in an ancient well without the slightest ripple. Is this guy putting on an act? The ultimate trump card is clearly in my hands, yet he can still pretend to be so calm. His self-esteem is quite strong. However, when I completely capture this sword later, will he still be so calm? Ping Han sneered in his heart. He had made up his mind that the young man in white was just putting on an act. Zhuowen, you still have a chance to live. If you follow us back to the Impermanence Palace and wait for the punishment hall of the Impermanence Palace to deal with you, you may still have a chance to live. You've already lost. If you refuse to admit defeat, you may be killed on the spot. It's useless even if you beg for mercy. Ping Han could not help but say. Zhuowen looked at Ping Han indifferently and said, "You haven't won yet, and you think you can capture me? You think too highly of yourself." Ping Han's eyes flashed with anger. He snorted coldly and no longer spoke. However, the killing intent in his eyes became more intense and terrifying. Chapter 27:20. True strength. Damn. This son of a b****. He can't beat me, so he bullies me with numbers. This is disgusting. Does he really think that I don't have any helpers? Xiao He was so angry that his liver hurt. He looked at Zhuowen and shouted, "Boy, what are you waiting for? Where are the blood, immortal sword, and the death sacrifice sword?" Xiao He's words shocked Ping Han and the other two, but they soon calmed down. They thought that the weapon spirit of the Thunderfire Sword was just bluffing. Puff, puff. Suddenly, 2 streams of blood shot out, followed by 2 blood-curdling screams. Ping Han was shocked. He quickly looked to his sides and saw that both of his junior brothers had lost an arm. Blood gushed out as if it could not be stopped. Their appearance was extremely miserable. Ping Han also saw the real culprit, who cut off his 2 junior brothers. It was 2 divine swords. One of the divine swords shone with bloody light, while the other was surrounded by death chi. They were both extraordinary. Although the aura of these 2 divine swords was not as strong as the Thunderfire Sword, they were still divine weapons of primordial origin master. From their aura, it could be seen that the power of these 2 divine swords was comparable to that of a peak primordial origin master. You have divine weapons of primordial origin master? How can one person control so many divine weapons of primordial origin master? Ping Han was shocked and in disbelief. He also had a primordial level god artifact, but to drive it, he needed to use all of his consciousness to drive the primordial level god artifact. As for driving 2 divine weapons of primordial origin master, his divine sense could not withstand it. In his opinion, primordial origin master could not drive 2 divine weapons of primordial origin master at the same time, let alone 3. But the white-clothed youth in front of him did it. Was this guy really the heavenly lawmaster? Although Ping Han was shocked, it was not the time for him to be shocked because the Thunderfire Sword had led the Blood Immortal Sword and the Death Sacrifice Sword over. After going through Xiao He's conditions, the Blood Immortal Sword and the death sacrifice sword had improved significantly. At the same time, the two divine swords had become this guy's loyal subordinates. They would obey Xiao Hei's orders without question. Bang, bang, bang. In an instant, the three divine swords formed a triangular formation, sealing off all of Ping Han's blind spots. Sword shadows surrounded Ping Han like a storm, and Ping Han himself became the core of the sword shadow storm, trapped within. For a moment, Ping Han fell into an absolute disadvantage. The attacks of the three divine swords were too fierce, suppressing Ping Han to the point where he was covered in cuts and bruises. Puchi. Finally, Ping Han struggled to break free from the encirclement. He spat out a mouthful of blood, and his face was pale. The aura on his body was extremely weak. "You are truly despicable. You killed the people of my impermanence palace. You will pay the debt of blood with blood. You will never have peace." Ping Han spat out another mouthful of blood. After saying these words, he crushed the escape talisman that he had prepared long ago. He turned into a streamer and rushed into the distance. Unfortunately, Zhuowen was always on guard against Ping Han's movements. At this moment, seeing Ping Han crush the escape talisman, he was able to determine the direction in which Ping Han wanted to leave in advance, and blocked in front of Ping Han. A mere heavenly law master, relying on three divine artifacts of the origin, dares to block in front of me? You are simply courting death. When Ping Han saw that Zhuowen had stopped him, he felt relieved, and a trace of disdain rose in his heart. He suddenly punched out, intending to kill the white-clothed youth in front of him with one blow. Zhuowen stood calmly in the same place, looking at Ping Han's fist that was getting closer and closer. His eyes flashed like lightning, and he also punched out. This punch did not use the power of the Panga's sacred body, but the power of his true body. He wanted to see if the true body of the heavenly lawmaster could really fight against the master of the origin. When Zhuowen first broke through, he felt that his true body was completely different from the ordinary heavenly lawmasters. Moreover, his strength was much stronger than the ordinary heavenly lawmasters. Boom! Zhuowen directly collided with Ping Han. Terrifying energy ripples spread out, and the surrounding starry sky rippled with dense ripples. Zhuowen snorted and retreated dozens of steps. Ping Han's body swayed, and after he stabilized himself, he looked at the white-clothed youth in front of him in shock. In his opinion, his punch should be enough to kill the white-clothed youth in front of him, who was merely the heavenly lawmaster. However, the fact was that the white-clothed youth in front of him was not killed by him, but blocked his attack. Moreover, the white-clothed youth only retreated dozens of steps, as if he was not injured at all. Ping Han felt that it was incredible. The white-clothed youth in front of him was much weaker than him. Not only did the white-clothed youth block his attack, but he was also not injured. This was too unexpected. Zhuowen steadied himself, but his eyes were shining. He knew that the strength of his true body was indeed comparable to that of the ordinary master of the origin. As for Ping Han's attack, it was indeed powerful. If Zhuowen's Panga's sacred body was not powerful, Zhuowen might have been seriously injured by the attack just now. Go to hell. Ping Han's eyes were gloomy. He knew that he had underestimated the white-clothed youth in front of him. He had used all his skills in this attack, and he was determined to kill this youth completely. Zhuowen also punched out again. This time, he did not use the strength of his true body, but the strength of his Panga's sacred body. Since he had already tested the strength of his true body and had a general understanding of it, he naturally would not use it again. Instead, he planned to use his Panga's sacred body to end the battle quickly. When Ping Han's fist collided with Zhuowen's fist again, Ping Han's expression changed. He could feel a suffocating power coming from the fist in front of him. This force was like an avalanche pouring into Ping Han's fist. Ping Han could clearly feel that this power had caused his arm to be twisted and fractured. Furthermore, it was bent in an irregular manner. Then, his arm exploded inch by inch, turning into a bloody mist. A sense of helplessness rose in Ping Han's heart. This force was so terrifying that he could not resist it at all. Ping Han wanted to retreat and avoid this terrifying power, but unfortunately, after that power destroyed his arm, it was like a hot knife through butter directly entering his body. Bang! 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 Bursts of bloody mist burst out from Ping Han's body. Every time a burst of bloody mist burst out, Ping Han took a step back. He took dozens of steps back, and dozens of horrible wounds appeared on his body. The bloody wounds looked very terrifying. Ping Han suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood. His body was stiff, and he was almost beaten to death. Chapter 27-21. Fu Chi Ping Han's entire body trembled as the threat of death assaulted him, and he shouted loudly, "You can't kill me! Once you kill me, the palace master of Impermanence Palace, Fu Chi, will know. He'll immediately know who killed me. You're simply courting death by doing this." Unfortunately, Ping Han's words were completely useless against Zhuowen. Zhuowen's expression was cold and indifferent as he smashed his fist towards the center of Ping Han's forehead with unstoppable force. However, when his fist force hit Ping Han's forehead, a blood-red mark appeared on Ping Han's forehead. The blood-red mark swiftly became clear, and then it erupted with a force that wasn't inferior to Ping Han's and suddenly blasted towards Zhuowen. Rumble! Thunder rumbled. Zhuowen felt as if his fist had struck a hard rock, and he couldn't help but retreat a few hundred meters. He gazed solemnly at the blood-red mark that flashed out from the center of Ping Han's forehead. The blood-red mark directly wriggled in the starry sky and finally transformed into an old man over the age of 60. The old man's gaze was cold, and he looked at Zhuowen with extreme hostility. "Who are you? You dared to touch the successor of my Impermanence Palace. Could it be that you want to go against my Impermanence Palace?" Ping Han greets the palace master. Ping Han was delighted and hurriedly knelt down on one knee. The old man that was formed from the blood-red mark was the palace master of Impermanence Palace, Fu Chi. Fu Chi nodded to Ping Han, and then he looked at Zhuowen and said in a cold voice, "I'll give you a chance now. Become Ping Han's servant, and I'll consider sparing your life." Zhuowen's eyes narrowed, and he said coldly, "You're just a soul, yet you're actually so arrogant. Not to mention that you're just a soul. I wouldn't be afraid even if your main body came here personally." Sure enough, as soon as Zhuowen spoke, Fu Chi's expression turned cold, and he said coldly, "Since you're courting death, then I'll fulfill your wish." As he spoke, Fu Chi's image took a step forward, and his right hand formed a claw that suddenly grabbed towards Zhuowen. Needless to say, Fu Chi was worthy of being an expert at the second step of the Tao validation realm. She was merely a strand of her nascent soul, yet her attack was much more terrifying than Ping Han's. Ping Han's eyes were filled with fervor as he watched Fu Chi attack. He knew that no matter how heaven-defying the white-clothed young man was, it was impossible for him to be a match for Fu Chi. One had to know that second-step Tao validation experts were existences that could reach the heavens in his eyes. Even if it was only a strand of Fu Chi's soul, her strength was far above his, so killing Zhuowen wasn't a problem at all. Zhuowen sneered in his heart. He had no intention of tangling with Fu Chi's principal spirit at all. Therefore, he immediately used his intent to create a chi blade. Zhuowen's right hand was like a blade, and the surface of the blade was covered with a layer of extremely mysterious and powerful light. This was the light of the sky opening blade. Puchi! Zhuowen suddenly slashed out and struck Fu Chi's body. Fu Chi sneered, looking down on Zhuowen's move at all. However, the moment she came into contact with the sky-opening blade, her nascent soul actually emitted white smoke, and she even let out a miserable cry. A huge wound was actually cut open on her body. Fu Qi's image immediately flew back. After retreating to a safe distance, she looked at Zhuowen in surprise. The wound on his chest had gradually healed, but Fu Qi's image was much dimmer than before. Obviously, the attack just now had consumed a lot of her energy. Ping Han was dumbfounded as he watched this scene in disbelief. After all, Fu Qi was an expert at the second step of the Dao validation realm. Even if she was only a nascent soul, her strength was monstrous. However, she was actually easily defeated by this white-clothed young man. Was this really the heavenly Dao master? Thinking of this, Ping Han's heart thumped. He couldn't help but start to retreat. He already had the intention to retreat. The strength of the white-clothed young man in front of him was beyond his imagination. He didn't have much confidence in Fu Qi's nascent soul. Unfortunately, Xiao He led the blood immortal sword and the sacrificial death sword to block Ping Han's path. Moreover, Xiao He ruthlessly mocked Ping Han for being a coward. This made Ping Han so angry that he was fuming, but he couldn't do anything. Xiao He's strength was already above his with the blood immortal sword and the sacrificial death sword. She could firmly suppress him, so he didn't dare to act rashly. Zhuowen continued to rush forward in a spurt of energy. In an instant, he got close to Fu Qi and used the sky-opening blade again, easily tearing Fu Qi's nascent soul apart. After repeating this 3 times, Fu Qi's nascent soul was almost transparent. Zhuowen knew that even if he didn't do anything, this trace of Fu Qi's nascent soul would gradually dissipate. Fu Qi was extremely unwilling. He stared coldly at Zhuowen and said, "Aunt, if you dare to kill Ping Han, you will become an enemy of my impermanence palace. When this old man returns, I will kill you even if I have to go to heaven or hell." Zhuowen sneered and ignored Fu Qi. Instead, he walked toward Ping Han. Ping Han was so scared that he hurriedly retreated. Unfortunately, Xiao He led the blood immortal sword and the sacrificial death sword to block Ping Han's path. Moreover, Xiao He was very despicable. He kept harassing Ping Han, making Ping Han unable to bear it. Zhuowen grabbed Ping Han casually and easily held him in the palm of his hand. Ping Han wanted to resist, but the power of Zhuowen's Pangu's sacred body was too terrifying. Ping Han was easily held in his hand like a chicken, unable to move. "Do you really dare to kill Ping Han? If you let Ping Han go, my impermanence palace will let bygones be bygones." Fu Qi was a little anxious and hurriedly said. Zhuowen sneered and said, "Now that Ping Han's life is in my hands, shouldn't you be speaking to me in a begging tone? Even now, you are still so high and mighty. Do you really think that I am a servant of your impermanence palace?" After saying that, Zhuowen exerted force with his right hand. The power of the 3 stars Pangu sacred body exploded. Immediately, Ping Han's neck bent and his vitality was cut off. His divine soul was destroyed. Ah, remember this. No matter who you are or where you are, I, Fu Qi, swear that I'll find you and completely annihilate you. Moreover, I, Fu Qi, won't let off anyone related to you. Fu Qi was flustered and exasperated. He did not expect that Zhuowen would really kill Ping Han and kill him in front of him. This was a direct slap to his face. Zhuowen could not be bothered with Fu Qi. With a wave of his sleeve, he completely erased Fu Qi's remaining primordial spirit. "It's time to enter the capital of the Huangji family. And have a look." Zhuowen's eyes were calm. He knew that he could not stay in the Huangji family's territory any longer and had to leave as soon as possible. There were also cultivators guarding the gate of the capital, although Zhuan did not have a pass. He easily entered the capital of the Huangji family after paying 2 high-grade, Heavenly Way origin crystals. However, the moment Zhuan entered the capital, he frowned because he found that there was a faint aura in the capital that he was subconsciously familiar with. This aura was very similar to the Zhurong venomous insect, but it was also different. Could it be that there are other ancestral sorcerers, venomous insects, in the capital? Chapter 27-22. Huanglin, the great Brahma domain of the 8 major heavens. An extremely luxurious spaceship stopped near the old site of the Wenshui Palace. A group of people stood on the deck of the flying ship. The person in the lead was a man with a dignified expression, and an old man with a glowing face stood by his side. The dignified man was the 3rd master of the Huangji clan, Huanglin, who'd come to the 8 heavens from the Impermanence Pier. The old man standing by Huanglin's side was the master of Impermanence Palace, Fu Qi. 3rd Prince Huangze's aura remains here. Moreover, the auras of Elder Bai and Elder Wu, who followed Huangze, are here as well. At the same time, I sense Zoda's aura not too far away. Huanglin frowned slightly as he looked around the starry sky and spoke in a low voice. Fu Qi carefully looked along Huanglin's gaze towards the surroundings, and then he said rather cautiously, "My lord, besides that, I sensed a strand of terrifying killing intent. This killing intent is extremely terrifying, and even I feel horrified by it." Fu Qi's heart shook slightly, especially when he sensed the surging killing intent in the surroundings. His expression was unsightly. The killing intent was too pure, and its destructive force was too great. He couldn't help but consider if he would be able to resist such a powerful killing intent. Huanglin's expression was extremely solemn as well. He said in a low voice, "This killing intent is terrifying indeed." However, Huangze and the other 2 weren't killed by the owner of this killing intent. Instead, the killing intent is the densest where Zoda's aura is. Zoda probably died to this killing intent. "My lord, did you sense the murderer's aura?" asked Fu Qi. Huanglin shook his head and said, "I'm guessing that the source of this killing intent is a ferocious object. Because its killing intent is too terrifying, it has concealed the murderer's aura. I can only vaguely sense a trace of its aura. It seems to be very weak, and it's merely at the extreme realm of life and death." Huanglin couldn't help but shake his head and laugh when he spoke up to this point. He felt that it was absurd to come to such a conclusion, and he thought to himself that he'd probably been misled by this terrifying killing intent. Fu Qi couldn't help but laugh as well. Clearly, he didn't think that the murderer was at the extreme realm of life and death. After all, the extreme realm of life and death was an ant that could be casually crushed to death. How could such an ant have the strength to kill 4 Tao-confirming powerhouses, including Zoda? This was simply impossible. Seems like the one who killed Huangze and Yuan Hui is the same person. Who is it that dared to disregard our Huangji clan and kill our people? Huanglin said angrily. In Huanglin's opinion, Huangze's death didn't matter. After all, he was just a good-for-nothing with mediocre talent. His death wouldn't affect the Huangji aristocratic family at all. However, Zoda was the master of destiny and was already a cornerstone of the Huangji aristocratic family. In addition, Master Yuan Hui was a true array Dao expert. The death of these 2 people was definitely a huge loss to the Huangji aristocratic family. No matter who it was, Huanglin had to find the culprit and make him pay with blood. Fu Qi said carefully, "My lord, the 8 heavens are not peaceful now. It is said that the leader of the demon race, Eastern Emperor Tai, has appeared and has already subdued 5 heavens. He has begun to integrate them into the demon realm. Moreover, Eastern Emperor Tai has a 9-story demon pagoda, which is filled with the corpses of great magi. These great magi were all third-step Tao, confirming mighty figures when they were alive. After death, their corpses were refined into corpse puppets. Although their strength can't be compared to when they were alive, their physical bodies are powerful. They are not comparable to ordinary second-step Tao confirming cultivators. Do you think the person who killed Master Yuan Hui and the others is from the demon realm? Huang Lin's expression changed slightly. Huang Lin didn't know about the formation of the monster realm until he came to the 8 heavens, especially Dong Huang Tai, who was an extremely ancient existence. He was an old monster who had survived in the brilliant era of the untainted heavenly realm. It might not be the demon realm. It might be more likely that it's an expert from the prehistoric heavenly realm. After all, Master Yuan Hui came to seal the passage to the prehistoric heavenly realm. However, for some reason, the seal of the passage was forcefully broken. Now, the living beings of the prehistoric heavenly realm have also occupied 2 heavens. The great Brahma heavenly realm is the last unoccupied heavenly realm. At this point, Huang Lin's eyes were filled with worry. Regardless of whether it was the demon race or the living beings of the prehistoric heavenly realm, they were actually incompatible with the human race. He was worried that the demon race would join forces with the prehistoric heavenly realm to attack the human race. If that was the case, he was worried that the human race would not be able to withstand the joint attack of the demon race and the prehistoric heavenly realm. Just as Huang Lin and Fu Qi were chatting casually, Huang Lin noticed that Fu Qi's expression was strange. His body was trembling slightly, as if he was forcefully suppressing the anger in his heart. "Palace Master Fu, what's wrong?" Huang Lin asked in surprise. Fu Qi took a deep breath and said solemnly, "Lord Huang Lin, the second successor of the Impermanence Palace that I personally appointed has been killed." Huang Lin was surprised. His gaze towards Fu Qi was tinged with a trace of pity. It had to be said that Fu Qi was very unlucky. The Impermanence Palace Master was the first successor that Fu Qi had personally appointed. He was also Fu Qi's biological son. He had been killed in the 8 heavens. This news had already made Fu Qi so angry that he wanted to kill someone. However, now that Fu Qi had left the Impermanence Palace and come to the 8 heavens, the second successor that he had personally appointed had also unfortunately been killed. The deaths of the 2 successors had dealt a huge blow to Fu Qi. "Palace Master Fu, do you know who killed your successor?" Huang Lin asked. "It's a young man in white. This young man has 3 primordial chaos grade divine artifacts. Moreover, the strange thing is that this person is only the heavenly Tao master, but he's extremely powerful. He actually killed Ping Han with a single punch," Fu Qi said with a frown. After all, Fu Qi had left a trace of his primordial spirit in Ping Han's body. After Zhuowen destroyed his primordial spirit, he knew immediately. Moreover, through the connection of the primordial spirit, he knew everything that had happened. Moreover, this kid killed someone not far from the entrance of the Huangji clan's capital. He's truly too detestable. Fu Qi spoke fiercely. Huang Lin's gaze was cold as well, and he said, "How arrogant! He actually dared to kill someone at the entrance of my Huangji clan. He doesn't take my Huangji clan seriously at all. Once we return, investigate this kid thoroughly. Once we capture him, we definitely won't let him off." Fu Qi was delighted and hurriedly bowed towards Huang Lin. He knew that Huang Lin was speaking to him. Since Huang Lin had spoken, then it meant that Huang Lin would represent the Huangji clan to interfere in this matter. With the help of the Huangji clan, Fu Qi knew that the white-clothed young man wouldn't be able to hide. "Thank you, Lord Huang Lin." Fu Qi hurriedly thanked him. Huang Lin waved his hand and said, "Your Impermanence Palace is a vassal of my Huangji clan after all. Since something has happened to your Impermanence Palace, then my Huangji clan will naturally not sit idly by. We'll return together once we've gathered all the auras. At that time, my Huangji clan will assist you in capturing the murderer." Chapter 27-23. A ruthless woman. After entering the capital of the Huangji clan, Zhuowen was dazzled by the prosperity of this gigantic city. It had to be said that the Huangji family was indeed willing to spend money. They were actually able to build such a huge city. Moreover, they had even set up such a flawless spirit formation outside the city. The streets inside were so spacious that they did not look like streets, but more like football fields. However, even such a large street was bustling with people. It was extremely lively and crowded. "Is that aura coming from there?" Zhuowen narrowed his eyes and cast his gaze to the front. He followed his senses and kept rushing forward at an extremely fast speed. He was very excited. His Pango's sacred body had been promoted to the peak of the 3-star level, and he increasingly felt that it would not be easy for him to promote his Pango's sacred body, especially now that he was promoting from the peak of the 3-star level to the 4-star level. He felt that no matter how many heavenly law origin crystals he used, he would not be able to successfully promote to the 4-star level. It was not a matter of the amount of energy, but a matter of the quality of the energy. After all, the 3-star level and the 4-star level were major realms apart. Zhuowen knew that if he wanted to successfully promote, he had to use the ancestral wizard venomous insects. The Pango's sacred body needed to be integrated with the 12 ancestral wizard venomous insects to finally achieve the perfect Panga sacred body. Zhuowen's current Panga sacred body was not complete. He had only integrated with the Zhurong venomous insect. If he wanted to integrate the perfect Panga sacred body, he had to collect the remaining 11 ancestral wizard venomous insects. Now, Zhuowen actually sensed the aura of the ancestral wizard venomous insects in the capital of the Huangji clan. How could he not be excited and lose control of himself? After all, if he could get another ancestral wizard venomous insect, his Pango's sacred body could easily be promoted to the 4-star level. Zhuowen walked all the way along the street in front of him and finally came to the end. He stopped in front of a huge palace. The palace that appeared in front of Zhuowen covered a vast area, occupying 1/10 of the area of this huge city. From afar, it looked like a city within a city. Zhuowen also discovered that the surface of the inner city was also overflowing with light and color. The array formations and restrictions set up here were even more strict and terrifying than the outer city. Moreover, the security here was even tighter and denser. Powerful cultivators could be seen patrolling the surroundings. Moreover, Zhuowen's divine sense could sense that there were many cultivators with extremely powerful auras in the city. He was sure that these cultivators were all experts above the second step of Dao validation. Zhuowen took a step forward and was about to step into the inner city when he was immediately stopped by 2 cultivators at the city gate. Zhuowen looked at the 2 cultivators guarding the door in surprise because he found that the 2 cultivators guarding the door were actually Primordial Chaos Lord. Even the gatekeepers were Lord Primordial Chaos. From this, one could see how huge the power within the city was. If you don't have the command token bestowed by the Huangji clan, then please wait. One of the guarding cultivators could be considered to be polite, and he stopped Zhuowen and spoke indifferently. Zhuowen stopped and looked at the bustling scene inside the city gate. He also calmed down. It seemed that the ancestral witch goo he sensed was inside the Huangji clan. Then why can she go in? Zhuo suddenly pointed at a woman who had caught up from behind and asked indifferently. The woman was wearing a pale yellow cheongsam with a pattern of two cross sabers on the chest of the cheongsam. There was a trace of arrogance on her pretty face. The woman obviously heard Zhuowen's question. She could not help but turn around and look at Zhuowen behind her with disdain. She sneered and ridiculed. "Who do you think you are?" "I'm a disciple of the Huangji clan." "Who do you think you are? How dare you compare yourself to me?" Zhuowen just looked at the woman coldly. He could see from the attitude of the guards at the city gate that the woman should not have a high status in the Huangji clan. She was probably just the most ordinary disciple. Otherwise, the guards would definitely reveal a respectful expression. However, it was exactly the opposite. The guards seemed to be very calm and did not reveal any other unusual expressions when facing the woman. When the woman saw Zhuowen looking on coldly and indifferently, her arrogant expression instantly turned into anger. In the woman's eyes, the white-clothed young man before her was really too ordinary. Even the aura on his body was only that of the heavenly Tao Master, which was a level lower than her. As for his status, it was different. This fellow was definitely a nobody. On the other hand, she was a disciple of the Huangji clan. Although she was only an ordinary disciple, at least she had the name of the Huangji clan. Outside the city, she was very glorious and everyone praised and flattered her. However, this ordinary young man before her actually dared to look at her with such an expression. It really made her furious and extremely displeased. It was precisely because of the extreme displeasure in her heart that the woman could not help but want to teach Zhuowen a lesson. "You don't know the immensity of heaven and earth. What qualifications do your dog eyes have to look at me? Cripple your own eyes right now, and I won't pursue the matter. After that, scram. I'm annoyed just by looking at you." The woman did not give up. Zhuowen could not be bothered with the woman. Since the ancestral sorcerer's goo worm was inside the Huangji clan, it was definitely impossible for him to enter the Huangji clan and obtain the ancestral sorcerer's goo worm with his current cultivation. Now, he planned to leave the city within the city and consider a countermeasure before deciding whether to take the risk and enter the Huangji clan. When he thought of this, Zhuowen turned around and intended to leave. "Where are you going?" "I think you're just courting death. Since you're not crippling your own dog eyes, I'll help you. After that, I'll break your dog legs, you dog slave." When she saw that Zhuowen ignored her and turned around to leave, the woman was so angry that she trembled. She stomped her foot and actually charged towards Zhuowen and brazenly attacked him. The two guards at the city gate frowned slightly. They felt that the woman's unwillingness to give up was a little too much. However, they were only guards and had no right to interfere with the affairs of the Huangji clan's disciples. Moreover, Zhuowen was not related to them in any way. Naturally, they would not attack a young man that they did not know. Zhuowen's gaze was cold. This woman was really rude and unreasonable. He, Zhuowen, did not want to cause trouble, so he simply ignored this woman. This woman actually took the initiative to look for trouble and even said such ruthless words. She was looking for trouble, no matter how good Zhuowen's temper was. He was still a little angry in his heart. The woman's speed was extremely fast. In an instant, she was behind Zhuowen. Her right hand formed a palm and whizzed out. She directly blasted towards Zhuowen's back. At the same time, the woman's left index finger and middle finger separated. Like an eagle's claw, they stretched out from the back of Zhuowen's head and directly gouged out Zhuowen's eyeballs. She wanted to cripple Zhuowen's eyes. The woman's right leg was like a whip that shot towards Zhuowen's legs. She wanted to use this opportunity to completely cripple Zhuowen's legs. one had to admit that the woman was really ruthless. Chapter 27:24. Chen Feijuan's eyes flashed with murderous intent when he saw the woman's move. He stopped in place and reached out with his right hand like a snake to wrap around the woman's hands. At the same time, he kicked his right leg to meet the woman's whip kick. Crack! Zhuo Wen's right hand wrapped around the woman's hands and tightened. He actually managed to bind the woman's hands. At the same time, his leg collided with the woman's whip leg. Immediately, the clear sound of bones breaking rang out. With a clear scream, the woman flew backward like a falling leaf. Her hands were twisted and almost crippled. The woman's right leg was the most miserable. After being hit by Zhuowen, it exploded into a cloud of blood and disappeared. Zhuowen didn't even look at the woman who had been crippled by him. He just turned around and left. Just now, he secretly used a part of the power of the Pangu's sacred body to cripple the woman's hands and right leg. Unless he used a divine pill refined from a second-step Tao validation divine medicine, it would be very difficult for the woman's broken limbs to recover. This woman was just an ordinary disciple of the Huangji clan. It was impossible for the Huangji clan to take out such a precious thing to restore her body. Wait, you beat up someone from the Huangji clan. Are you going to leave just like that? The cultivators guarding the gate were completely stunned. They didn't expect that Zhuowen, who was only the heavenly Tao master, could easily cripple the woman. When they came back to their senses, they immediately called out to Zhuowen, "You want to avenge her?" Zhuowen turned around and looked at the two guards with extreme hostility. The two guards felt the aura that suddenly escaped from Zhuowen's body, and their hearts trembled. The cultivator in front of them was only the heavenly Tao master, but at that moment he gave them an unbearable sense of fear. Was this really a feeling that a heavenly Tao master could give off? Although they knew that the woman was in the wrong first, they couldn't ignore the fact that she was a disciple of the Huangji clan and had been crippled by an outsider in front of the Huangji clan. Fellow brother, you may have misunderstood. We are not here to avenge this woman. Rather, you should not have been so heavy-handed. One of the gatekeepers said solemnly, "She was the one who wanted to cripple me. I was just defending myself. She deserved to be beaten up like this." Zhuowen said calmly, "Brother, please come with me to the Hall of Penal Law of the Huangji clan. I will report this matter to the elders of the Hall of Penal Law. At that time, the elders of the Hall of Penal Law will give you justice. However, if you leave now, regardless of whether you're in the wrong or not, the Huangji clan will still issue an arrest warrant for you. At that time, even if you are right, you will have no reason to say anything. The Huangji aristocratic family will indiscriminately capture you and kill you." The gatekeeper said rather sincerely. Zhuowen's eyes flashed, and he agreed to the cultivator's suggestion. Of course, a large part of the reason why he agreed was because he wanted to enter the city, within the city, to take a look. He wanted to sense the location of the ancestral shaman Gu. Perhaps he had a certain chance of obtaining the ancestral shaman Gu. As long as he obtained the ancestral shaman Gu and refined it, his Pangu's sacred body would undergo a transformation and be promoted to a 4-star level. Once the Pangu's sacred body was promoted to a 4-star level, Zhuowen knew that there were not many people in the Huangji clan who could threaten his life. The only ones who could threaten him were those old monsters who had not appeared for a long time. These old monsters had been in seclusion all year round to pursue a more powerful realm. As long as Zhuowen did not make too much trouble, they should not come out easily. Of course, even if they came out, Zhuowen was not afraid. As long as he left the capital city, with the speed of the space-time roulette, even a third-step Tao validation cultivator might not be able to catch up with him. After Zhuowen agreed, the gatekeeper heaved a sigh of relief, even though the white-robed young man before him was only a heavenly Tao master. Although the white-robed young man was only a white-robed young man, for some reason he felt an extremely strong sense of crisis. After all, the woman was a Daoyuan master, but she had been crippled by this person with a single move. It could be seen that this person's strength was at least at the level of Hunyuan master. In fact, he did not want to casually fight against such an opponent. This matter had nothing to do with him, so it was naturally best to leave it to the Hall of Penal Law. "Brother, please follow me." The cultivator nodded gratefully at Zhuowen, carried the woman on his shoulder, and led the way for Zhuowen. "You're dead. How dare you hit me so hard? As long as you dare to enter the Hall of Penal Law, there will be no return. You'll definitely die." The woman grimaced in pain, but she did not faint in the end. Instead, she glared at Zhuowen and kept cursing. She was in the right and did not spare him. "You can continue to talk, and I can continue to attack you. You choose." Zhuowen was leisurely, but the killing intent in his eyes became more and more terrifying. The woman's heart trembled, and her face revealed an embarrassed expression, but she stopped cursing. Obviously, she was really afraid of Zhuowen. The cultivator guarding the gate carried the woman and walked in front, while Zhuowen walked behind. They passed through the city within the city, and their strange combination naturally attracted the attention of many passing cultivators, causing them to discuss animatedly. The woman's face was embarrassed. She saw many disciples she knew, and they were snickering not far away. This made the woman feel ashamed and angry, and her hatred for Zhuowen deepened. In the process of walking to the Hall of Penal Law, Zhuowen chatted with the gatekeeper, and he found out that the gatekeeper's name was Chun Fa. The woman who was crippled by him was called Chun Dan, and she was only an ordinary disciple of the Huangji family. She was considered to be at the bottom of the Huangji family. After knowing Chun Dan's identity, Zhuowen was not worried about his situation. With Chun Fa speaking up for him, he felt that the Hall of Penal Law would still handle it impartially. When the time came, he would also have to look for traces of the ancestral, which grew worm in the inner city. As he walked towards the Hall of Penal Law, Zhuowen found that the aura of the ancestral, which grew worm, was getting closer and closer to him. This made Zhuowen very surprised. This meant that the ancestral, which grew worm, he sensed was near the Hall of Penal Law. After a while, Chun Fa led Zhuowen to the Hall of Penal Law. The color of the Hall of Penal Law's buildings was cold, and it emitted a serious and cold atmosphere. It gave people a cold feeling. "Chun Fa, why are you not guarding the door? What are you doing in the Hall of Penal Law?" A man dressed in black walked out of the Hall of Penal Law. When he saw Chun Fa walking towards him, he could not help but ask in surprise, "Zhu Rong, is the elder of the Hall of Penal Law here? I have an urgent matter that requires his judgment." Chun Fa looked at the man in black in surprise. The man named Zhu Rong frowned and hesitated for a moment before saying, "The elder is not here. The vice hall master is inside. You can go in and look for him." "The vice hall master is inside." Chun Fa frowned, and a hint of worry appeared in his eyes. "Since the elder is not here, then I'll wait first. I'll come back later." Chapter 27-25. Zhou Ling hearing the cold voice from the Hall of Penal Law, Chun Fa's expression changed slightly. His eyes were cold, but he still respectfully cupped his hands towards the Hall of Penal Law and said, "Chun Fa greets the Vice Hall Master." Zhu Rong also hurriedly bowed and greeted the Deputy Hall Master. Then he lowered his head submissively and did not dare to breathe loudly. Zhuowen stood where he was and raised his head to look at the Hall of Penal Law. A middle-aged man with a round and oily face slowly walked out. This middle-aged man was so bloated that he was equivalent to two people. As he walked, he swayed as if he would fall forward at any time. The middle-aged man was very satisfied with Zhu Rong and Chen Fei's attitude. His narrowed eyes swept over them, and his gaze fell on Zhuowen, who was behind Chen Fei. When he saw that Zhuowen was actually standing upright and did not bow like Chen Fei and Zhu Rong, he was displeased. He pointed at Zhuowen and said, "Which disciple of the Huangji clan are you? Why haven't I seen you before?" Chen Fei hurriedly said, "Vice Hall Master, this person isn't a disciple of my Huangji clan." Chen Fei, you've got guts. You actually dared to bring someone who isn't a disciple of my Huangji clan in. You think you're very amazing? Bring in any Tom, Dick, or Harry. The middle-aged man raised his voice a lot like a loudspeaker. It was loud and piercing to the ears, and his words were also very unpleasant. Zhuowen looked on coldly from the side, while the female Chun Dan on Chen Fei's shoulder saw that the vice hall master was targeting Zhuowen and immediately revealed a happy expression. She knew that the white-clothed youth in front of her had offended the vice hall master. With the vice hall master's vengeful personality, this fellow would definitely suffer. Vice hall master, this person didn't distinguish between right and wrong. He stopped my daughter at the city gate. He wanted to molest me because of my beauty. I resisted, but he used despicable means to beat me up. This person is too much. Vice Hall Master, please help me. Chun Dan acted according to the situation. She hurriedly complained that she had been wronged and pushed all the blame and responsibility onto Zhuowen. Sure enough, when the middle-aged man saw the injuries on Chun Dan's body, his eyes became cold and gloomy. A murderous intent like a storm enveloped Zhuowen's entire body. Chen Fei felt a chill in his heart. He hurriedly cupped his fists and pleaded, "Deputy Hall Master, please calm down. This is a misunderstanding." It was Junior Marshal's sister Chun Dan who was unforgiving. She provoked Brother Zhuo first. Brother Zhuo was just defending himself. Chun Dan cried out in alarm and rushed to say, "Vice Hall Master, this Chen Fei isn't a good person either. He's harboring this kid, bending the law for personal gain, and helping outsiders. You must seek justice for me, your disciple." Chen Fei was anxious in his heart. He hurriedly said to Chun Dan, who was on his shoulder, "Shut up. Now you're actually twisting the truth. Do you believe that I won't tear your mouth apart?" Chun Dan didn't care about the anxious Chen Fei at all. She continued to complain about Zhuowen first. In any case, it was all kinds of slander. "If you say another word, I'll completely cripple you. I'll make you a cripple. You won't even be able to be a cultivator." Zhuowen was still calm. He looked at Chun Dan. Although his voice was calm, it contained a strong, murderous intent. Chun Dan shrunk her neck. She was a little scared. However, she quickly remembered that the Vice Hall Master was here. She didn't think it was a big deal. She continued, "How dare you? The Huangji aristocratic family. You're an outsider who dares to be so arrogant and even dare to threaten me. You're simply asking for death." Zhuowen didn't say anything else. He took a step forward. His right hand formed a claw and grabbed towards Chun Dan's neck. He wanted to lift her up. Bang! A terrifying force blasted out and blocked Zhuowen's claw. Zhuowen frowned and involuntarily retreated more than 10 steps. Every step he took set off a terrifying force. This was him channeling the remaining force from his body to his feet. Zhuowen raised his head and coldly looked at the rotund, middle-aged man. Although this middle-aged man was round like a roly-poly toy, his strength wasn't weak. With Zhuowen's divine sense, he could sense that this middle-aged man's cultivation should be a half-step heaven's mandate master. His strength was far above Chen Fei. He's actually fine. The middle-aged man looked at Zhuowen, who was only retreating and didn't suffer any injuries. His voice was filled with surprise. He was a half-step heaven's mandate master, and the white-clothed youth in front of him was only a heavenly Tao master. The difference between the two was huge. This white-clothed youth actually blocked his attack and didn't seem to be injured. Chun Fa, Zhu Rong, and Chun Dan also looked at this scene in amazement. Among them, Chun Dan and Chun Fa were the most shocked. Obviously, Zhuowen's strength was somewhat beyond their expectations. He's got some skill. However, the Vice Hall Master is a half-step heaven's mandate master. When he gets serious, this arrogant guy will taste the bitter fruit. Chun Dan muttered. He thought that Zhuowen was just lucky this time. You've got guts. You actually dared to attack in front of me. Who do you think you are? The middle-aged man was somewhat angry and coldly said, "This woman is distorting the truth. I've already warned her. Unfortunately, she's still trying to smear my name. I'm not a saint. I won't allow this bitch to slander me as she pleases," said Zhuowen indifferently. "Who are you calling a bitch?" Chun Dan yelled. Zhuowen didn't pay attention to Chun Dan at all. Instead, he looked at the middle-aged man and said, "As the Vice Hall Master of the Hall of Penal Law, you should enforce the law impartially and fairly. Unfortunately, I don't see how you handle things fairly. What qualifications do you have to be the Vice Hall Master of the Hall of Penal Law? You're courting death. Do you really think that I won't dare to touch you just because Chun Fa brought you here? Die for me." The middle-aged man was furious. He attacked without holding back. The aura of a half-step heaven's mandate master burst out without holding back. "Vice Hall Master, you're being unreasonable. This person didn't do anything wrong. Chun Fa's expression changed greatly. He threw the Chun Dan on his shoulder to the ground and blocked in front of Zhuowen. He fiercely punched the middle-aged man. "Puchi!" Chun Fa groaned and spat out a mouthful of blood. His face was as pale as snow, and his forehead was covered in cold sweat. Zhuowen retreated several dozen steps and caught Chun Fa's body. Sensing Chun Fa's extremely weak injuries, his eyes were somewhat cold. This Vice Hall Master was simply too unreasonable. Not only did he not act impartially, but he also attacked without distinguishing between right and wrong. Zhuowen took out a divine healing pill and fed it to Chun Fa. Chun Fa's injuries were suppressed, and Chun Fa's pale face regained some color. "Brother Chun, many thanks," Zhuowen said gratefully. Chapter 27-26. Cripple Chun Fa shook his head and said guiltily, "Brother Zhuo, I've implicated you. If the elder of the Hall of Penal Law were here, he would definitely give you justice. The elder has always been meticulous and impartial." Chun Fa continued, "Brother Zhuo, you should leave first. I'll help you block the Vice Hall Master. This is my fault." Zhuowen fell silent and shook his head. "No need. Also, this damn fatty won't let me go. Look around." Chun Fa was stunned. His face turned pale as he realized that the Hall of Penal Law had been surrounded by a group of black-clothed cultivators. They were all disciples of the Hall of Penal Law, under the Vice Hall Master's orders. They blocked the way out of the Hall of Penal Law. Chun Fa looked at the middle-aged man angrily and said, "Vice Hall Master, aren't you going too far? It's our freedom to come and go. Are you planning to use force?" The middle-aged man said carelessly, "Chun Fa, I won't make things difficult for you. Leave this little bastard behind and get the hell out of here. I won't pursue the matter of you offending me today." Chun Fa said angrily. The middle-aged man did not wait for Chun Fa to continue speaking. He took a step forward, and his right fist was like the wind as he suddenly punched out. A terrifying power exploded out and surged out waves of strength chi. It was like a spiral of strength chi, which looked extremely terrifying. Standing to the side, Zhu Rong's expression changed drastically. The middle-aged man's punch included Chen Fa. With the strength that the middle-aged man was displaying, even if Chen Fa didn't die, he would be half dead. Zhu Rong's eyes flashed with a trace of pity, but he didn't dare to step forward. Although he had a good relationship with Chen Fa, it wasn't to the point where he would risk his life for him. Chun Dan fell to the ground and grimaced in pain. However, after seeing the middle-aged man attack, she smiled happily and stared at the scene. She wanted to see how this white-clothed young man would be torn into pieces by the middle-aged man. Chun Fa struggled to stand up and stood in front of Zhuowen. He bitterly smiled and said to Zhuowen behind him, "Brother Zhua, this is my responsibility. Originally, this wouldn't have happened, but it happened because of me. I'm really sorry. However, Brother Zhua, you don't have to worry. Since this is my responsibility, I will bear it all as long as I'm still alive." Zhuowen looked at Chen Fa, who had a firm gaze in his eyes. He stretched out his right hand and patted Chen Fa's shoulder lightly as he said, "Brother Chen, thank you. Leave this damned fatty to me. I think it should be fine as long as I don't kill this fatty." As he spoke, Zhuowen had already stood in front of Chen Fa. His voice was indifferent, and the corners of his mouth were raised. His eyes were filled with a different kind of confidence. Chen Fa was stunned. He immediately stepped forward and tried to pull Zhuowen. Unfortunately, he was blocked by an invisible force and couldn't take a step forward. Chen Fa was shocked. This force was so strong that he couldn't even think of resisting. Was this the power of this white-clothed young man in front of him? How could he be so strong? Is he really the master of the heavenly law? How could he have such strong power? Chen Fa was absent-minded as he stared at the young man in front of him. He even forgot about the middle-aged man who was getting closer and closer. Zhuowen stood where he was and clenched his right hand into a fist. The power of the three-star Peak Pangu's sacred body faintly burst out and gathered in his right fist. Then he suddenly punched out his right fist. It was ordinary, and there wasn't even any sound of the fist exploding. On the surface, it looked soft. Rumble. However, when the seemingly ordinary punch landed on the middle-aged man's fist, the crisp sound of bones cracking could be heard. Moreover, the sound of bones cracking could be heard continuously. Then, Zhu Rong, Chun Dan, Chen Fa, and the other disciples of the Hall of Penal Law were stunned to see that the middle-aged man's powerful punch had been neutralized. Then, the middle-aged man's right fist and right arm were twisted and bent like a tightened spring. Puff, puff, a bloody mist gushed out, accompanied by the middle-aged man's miserable shriek. It was ear-piercing and shocking. The middle-aged man continued to scream. At the same time, he made a prompt decision to retreat. Unfortunately, Zhuowen had already taken a step forward and arrived in front of the middle-aged man. Once again, he threw a punch at the middle-aged man's chest. Puchi, the middle-aged man, spat out a mouthful of blood as terrifying ripples appeared on his round body. This was because Zhuowen's power was far too terrifying. When it reached the middle-aged man's body, the fat on his body involuntarily trembled. This was to disperse the terrifying power from Zhuowen. What's going on? My eyes must be playing tricks on me. This guy actually injured the deputy hall master. Zhu Rong muttered to himself in disbelief. No one was more shocked than Chun Dan. Her mouth was wide open as she watched this scene. She was speechless for a long time. Chun Fa stuttered as he stuttered, "Brother Zhua, you defeated the deputy hall master?" Zhuowen smiled slightly and did not answer. Instead, he took a step forward and unceremoniously stepped on the middle-aged man's oily head with his right foot, pressing it deeply into the ground. The middle-aged man's head was stepped on. He struggled and flailed his limbs, but he could not break free at all. He could only whimper and feel very sullen. "How dare you? Let go of the deputy hall master. Are you trying to rebel?" After the surrounding disciples of the Hall of Penal Law came to their senses, they all began to speak. However, none of them dared to step forward to test Zhuowen's strength. "If you have the ability, then come and challenge me to a fight," Zhuowen taunted. Unfortunately, as soon as the words left Zhuowen's mouth, the disciples from the Hall of Beheadings and Executions dispersed. Not a single person dared to step forward to challenge him. Challenging the white-clothed youth in front of them was simply a joke. The deputy hall master, a half-step heavens will master, was easily defeated by this kid and even stepped on under his foot. They did not want to follow in their deputy hall master's footsteps. That would be too humiliating. The middle-aged man also noticed that the disciples of the Hall of Penal Law had all fled. He was so angry that his whole body trembled. He wanted to curse out loud, but unfortunately, his face was facing down. With his face buried under Zhuowen's foot, he could not speak at all. All he could do was whimper. Zhuowen's right foot suddenly stomped on the back of the middle-aged man's head. His powerful physical strength erupted, and the middle-aged man trembled all over before completely fainting. After doing this, Zhuowen slowly walked over to Chun Dan, who had fallen to the ground not far away. "Ah, what are you doing?" Chun Dan looked as if she had seen the plague. When she saw Zhuowen coming over, she quickly shrank back, her eyes filled with fear and dread. Chapter 27:27. The Elder of Penal Law. "No. Spare me. I won't do it again." Chun Dan screamed and begged for mercy, hoping that Zhuowen would spare her. Unfortunately for her, Zhuowen was very cold. He walked up to Chun Dan and attacked her repeatedly, destroying her foundation. Chun Dan lay on the ground, her face ashen. Her foundation had been completely destroyed, and she was no different from a cripple. In the cruel world of cultivation, cripples had no dignity. She would no longer be accepted by the Huangji clan and would be driven out of the clan. After doing all this, Zhuowen stood up and stopped in his tracks. He noticed that even more cultivators were crowding around him. These were the helpers the disciples of the Hall of Penal Law had called over. "What's going on? Why is it so noisy?" Suddenly, a dignified voice interrupted the clamor of the crowd. The cultivators who were originally surrounding the law enforcement hall and eyeing Zhuowen covetously all involuntarily opened up a path. At the end of the path, an old man with shoulder-length white hair walked over. There were a few wrinkles on his face, but they only added to his dignified and weathered aura. The Elder of Penal Law. Everyone hurriedly clasped their hands in greeting, including Chen Fei and Zhu Rong. Only Zhuowen stood in place, calmly looking at the old man and nodding slightly. He knew that this was the true master of the Hall of Penal Law, the Elder of Penal Law. The Elder of Penal Law's aura was incredibly strong, much stronger than Zoda's. He was probably at the peak of the Master of Destiny, only half a step away from breaking through to the Lord of Profound Secrets. The Elder of Penal Law glanced at Zhuowen. Although he didn't know what had happened, he knew that Zhuowen was standing on top of a rotund, middle-aged man, and Chun Dan was lying at his feet in a daze. Needless to say, everything that had happened here had something to do with this person. "Who are you? How dare you cause trouble in the Hall of Penal Law?" The Elder of Penal Law's expression was unsightly. He stared coldly at Zhuowen, his tone unfriendly. Chun Fei hurriedly went forward and explained everything that had happened to the punishment elder. After hearing all of this, The elders of beheadings and executions sat there silently for a moment. Then he waved his hand and said to the surrounding cultivators, "All of you, disperse. This is a matter for the hall of beheadings and executions. You people from the other halls shouldn't get involved." Hearing that, the surrounding cultivators dispersed, leaving only the disciples of the hall of beheadings behind. "You've caused enough trouble. Let Zhou go," the disciplinary elder said rudely to Zhuowen. Zhuowen nodded and lifted his foot. He knew that the Zhou that the disciplinary elder was talking about should be this damned fatty. The disciplinary elder came to Zhou side and squatted down to check on her. He discovered that other than her serious injuries, she was fine. Only then did his expression soften. "Disciplinary elder, you must seek justice for me. This man is vicious. He actually destroyed my foundation. You must kill him." Chun Dan hurriedly shouted when she saw the disciplinary elder. "Shut up!" The disciplinary elder snorted coldly. He looked at Chun Dan with an emotionless gaze. He knew what had happened, and knew that it was all because of this woman, so he didn't have a good impression of her. Chun Dan stood frozen in place, trembling. When she saw the look on the disciplinary elder's face, she knew that he wouldn't stand up for her. Thinking of this, Chun Dan felt a trace of regret. She shouldn't have been so unforgiving. In the end, her foundation was destroyed, and her future was bleak. "Zhu Rong, take Zhou to the inner room and settle her down." The disciplinary elder arranged everything in an orderly manner. Zhu Rong obeyed and led the middle-aged man into the hall of beheadings. The disciplinary elder turned around and looked coldly at Zhuowen. "Chen Fa may have stated the truth, and I know that this woman caused all of this, but you still made a mistake. You understand?" "What do you want, disciplinary elder?" Zhuowen asked calmly. Chen Fa looked nervously at the disciplinary elder. He wanted to plead for leniency, but under the disciplinary elder's stern gaze, he could only shut his mouth. The disciplinary elder's eyes flickered. After a moment of silence, he said, "If you agree to a condition of mine, I can let bygones be bygones." "What condition?" "If it's reasonable, I can agree," Zhuowen said seriously. The disciplinary elder looked at the white-clothed young man in front of him in surprise and nodded. "You have a good temperament. Although you are only a heavenly Tao master, your strength is so powerful. It seems that you have many secrets. However, no matter what secrets you have, it's your business. The condition I want you to agree to is to help my Hall of Beheadings win the High God Convention in half a month." Zhuowen was startled. Obviously, he didn't know much about the High God Convention that the disciplinary elder was talking about. Chun Fa, who was standing beside Zhuowen, quickly explained to Zhuowen what the High God Convention was. It didn't take long for Zhuowen to find out what the High God Convention was. Zhuowen's eyes shone with an unimaginable light when he realized the true meaning of the High God Convention. It was said that the High God Convention was held every 1,000 years by the Huangji clan. Every time, only the younger generation of the Huangji clan under the age of 1,000 would participate. The High God Convention was said to be a competition in the world of the Huangji clan's most precious treasure, the Sun-Moon Demon Mirror, to determine the ranking of the younger generation. Of course, the higher the ranking, the more generous the rewards. The Hall of Beheadings was only one of the hundreds of branches of the Huangji clan. Moreover, it was one of the weaker branches. The disciplinary elder wanted a disciple to get a good result in the High God Convention. At the very least, such a result would be very good. Although the reward wasn't much, at least the reputation of the Hall of Beheadings would be preserved. Unfortunately, the Hall of Beheadings' talent had withered in recent years. The younger generation of the Hall of Beheadings' disciples was very ordinary. There wasn't a candidate that could satisfy the disciplinary elder. The disciplinary elder knew that with the quality of the disciples of the Hall of Beheadings, they would only be cannon fodder for others if they participated in the High God Convention. Now, he had found Zhuowen. Although Zhuowen wasn't a member of the Huangji clan, he wasn't a disciple of any other power either. He was just a rogue cultivator. The disciplinary elder could accept him as a disciple in name temporarily and give him the qualification to participate in the High God Convention. Although Zhuowen's cultivation wasn't very high, his strength was first class. After all, even Zhou Ling had been defeated by him. He could be considered an outstanding talent even among the younger generation. This was the main reason why the disciplinary elder had taken a fancy to Zhuowen. The reason why Zhuowen was pleasantly surprised wasn't because of the High God Convention, but because of the Sun-Moon Demon Mirror that would appear in the convention. According to Chen Fa, the Sun-Moon Demon Mirror's artifact spirit was transformed from a mysterious and powerful venomous insect. It was said that the venomous insect was closely related to the ancestral shaman of the primitive heaven domain. It was the family treasure of the Huangji clan. Zhuowen knew that the venomous insect that Chen Fa had mentioned should be the venomous insect of the ancestral shaman. In other words, the aura of the venomous insect that Zhuowen had sensed was very likely from the so-called Sun-Moon Demon Mirror of the Huangji clan. Chapter 27-28, Sun-Moon Demonic Mirror. Have you made up your mind? I can tell you now that it's an opportunity to participate in the High God competition. The Sun-Moon Demonic Mirror is the most precious treasure of the Huangji family. It contains abundant energy and has a 50% chance of advancing to the next realm. Even if you are unlucky and fail to advance, your cultivation will still increase a lot. I'm giving you this opportunity. You should cherish it. Seeing that Zhuowen was deep in thought, the law enforcement elder couldn't help but tell him about the benefits of the Sun-Moon Demonic Mirror. Zhuowen was amused. It seemed that the law enforcement elder was running out of candidates. Judging from his anxious look, he must want Zhuowen to represent the law enforcement hall in the High God competition. Since Zhuowen knew that the Sun-Moon Demonic Mirror contained the ancestral sorcerer venomous insects, he had made up his mind to participate in the High God competition. If he had the chance, he planned to devour the ancestral sorcerer venomous insects in the Sun-Moon Demonic Mirror. He cultivated the Pangu sacred body, which was the origin of the 12 ancestral sorcerers. Even if Zhuowen's current strength was weak, he could still subdue the ancestral sorcerer venomous insects with the aura of the Pangu sacred body. Since the law enforcement elder has said so, I can't refuse. Zhuowen nodded. When the law enforcement elder saw that Zhuowen had agreed, a smile bloomed on his face like a blooming chrysanthemum. At the same time, he heaved a sigh of relief. The strength of the white-clothed young man in front of him was not bad. Although his cultivation was low, he was able to defeat Zhou Ling as the heavenly Tao master. Obviously, he was not an ordinary person. He would definitely have a place in the High God competition. You're Zhuowen, right? This is the token of a registered disciple of the Hall of Penal Law. With this token, you can participate in the High God competition. Now that the High God competition is coming, you can stay in the Hall of Penal Law for the time being, the law enforcement elder said with a smile. Zhuowen nodded. His eyes flickered, and he suddenly asked, Elder, I saw the third head of the Huangji family, Lord Huanglin, leave in a hurry. Where is he going? Zhuowen asked this question on purpose. He knew that Huanglin should have gone to the 8 heavens to investigate the cause of Huangze and Master Yuan Hui's death. Although he had purposely erased his own aura after killing Master Yuan Hui and the others, he still felt that things were not that simple. After all, the Huangji aristocratic family was a Dao Palace-level force. They had many tricks up their sleeves. Perhaps they had some special methods to find out who the real culprit was. The The law-enforcing elder was startled. Then he nodded and said, "There is indeed such a thing. I heard that the third prince and his guards have died in the 8 heavens. Sir Huang Lin must have gone to the 8 heavens to investigate the murderer." Chen Fei suddenly said, "Elder, I heard that Master Yuan Hui seemed to have met with a mishap. That's why the third master was alarmed." The law-enforcing elder sighed softly and said, "Master Yuan Hui is an eternal level divine formation master in our Huangji aristocratic family. His status is close to that of the third master. I really can't imagine that there is someone in the 8 heavens who can kill Master Yuan Hui." Chen Fei was silent. When the news of Master Yuan Hui's death came from the Huangji aristocratic family, it was like a heavy bomb had exploded and caused a huge uproar. Many people could not believe it. Zhuowen touched his nose. To be honest, he was the initiator of all this. If the law-enforcing elder and Chen Fei knew that the murderer who killed Master Yuan Hui and the third prince was standing right in front of them, who knew how they would feel? After the murderer killed the third prince and Master Yuan Hui, he must have erased all traces of the murder and escaped. Can the murderer be found in this way? Zhuowen pretended to be curious and asked. This was the question that Zhuowen wanted to ask the most. He wanted to know if the Huangji aristocratic family had the means to find the murderer after he had erased all traces. The law-enforcing elder sneered and said, "The murderer who killed Master Yuan Hui and the third prince is someone that our Huangji aristocratic family must kill. Master Huang Lin should have gone to the 8 heavens to collect the aura of the third prince and Master Yuan Hui. No matter how strong the murderer is, even if he can erase all traces, there will still be some aura left from the battle. Master Huanglin will go to the 8 heavens to collect the aura of Master Yuan Hui and the third prince and bring them back to integrate into the Sun and Moon demonic mirror. The Sun and Moon demonic mirror can trace the time and space according to the aura of the deceased. It can also show the scene of the deceased's death and leave behind the murderer's aura. By then, it will be clear who the murderer is." The law-enforcing elder sneered and continued, "The murderer thought that he did it secretly, but in fact, he will be found very soon. By then, he will be wanted by the Huangji aristocratic family." Zhuowen was shocked. He had not expected the Sun and Moon demonic mirror to be so powerful. It could trace the time and space, reconstruct the scene of the deceased's death, and leave behind the murderer's aura. That meant that when Master Huanglin returned, Zhuowen's identity would be exposed. Moreover, he was in the Huangji aristocratic family. By then, he would not be able to escape. Thinking of this, Zhuowen began to hesitate. His expression remained calm as he asked casually, "I wonder when Sir Huanglin will return? After all, the Sun and Moon demonic mirror is needed for the High God Convention. When Master Huanglin returns, will he be able to use the Sun and Moon demonic mirror to find the murderer?" The law-enforcing elder shook his head and said, "Of course not. When Master Huanglin returns, I think the High God Convention will have already begun. If he wants to find the murderer, he will have to wait until the convention is over." Zhuowen nodded and sighed in his heart. He was not willing to leave the Huangji aristocratic family. Now, after all, there was the ancestor sorcerer's venomous insect, which was a great opportunity for him. After all, if he obtained the ancestor sorcerer's venomous insect, Zhuowen would have a great chance of advancing to the 4-star Pangu's sacred body. By then, his strength would have a qualitative change. He did not want to miss such an opportunity. For this reason, it was absolutely worth it for Zhuowen to take a little risk. "Zhuowen, do you have any other questions?" the law-enforcing elder asked. Zhuowen shook his head. The law-enforcing elder nodded and waved his sleeve. He asked Chen Fa to bring Zhuowen into the Hall of Penal Law and arrange a good room for him. After the room was arranged, Chen Fa bid farewell to Zhuowen. He still had to guard the door. After all, it was his duty. After Chen Fa left, Zhuowen sat cross-legged in the room. He took out the Emperor Elixir Furnace and many divine herbs. He now planned to refine primordial Tao divine elixirs. He planned to use this half a month to improve his array skills. Chapter 27-29. Semi-finished Heavenly Fate pill activating the divine flame. The pill Emperor Turtle left the pill furnace and began to assist Zhuowen in refining the divine pills. The pill Emperor Turtle was working even harder than before. Of course, this fellow's appetite was also big, and it needed more divine pills. Heavenly Tao grade divine pills were no longer attractive to this fellow, and it urgently needed higher grade divine pills. Therefore, the pill Emperor Turtle was so eager to cooperate with Zhuowen when he decided to raise his alchemy level. Time passed slowly. Zhuowen spent 5 days and failed dozens of times before successfully refining a batch of primordial Tao grade divine pills, advancing to a primordial Tao grade alchemist. Zhuowen spent another 7 days and failed nearly 100 times before successfully refining a primordial Tao grade divine pill, advancing to a primordial Tao grade alchemist. After advancing to a primordial Tao grade alchemist, Zhuowen stopped refining. Instead, he put away the pill Emperor Furnace and opened the door. There were only 3 days left until the High God Convention. If Zhuowen wanted to break through to the Heavenly Fate realm, he would need to fail even more divine pills and more time to successfully advance. Although Zhuowen had a lot of divine herbs on him, he had consumed a lot of them in the past 12 days. In fact, the number of divine herbs on him had decreased sharply. Even Zhuowen was heartbroken. He had to slow down. Walking out of the room, Zhuowen sent a message to Chen Fa. Zhuowen knew nothing about the city within the city where the Huangji family was located. Therefore, he could only rely on Chen Fa, who was a local. Zhuowen didn't have to wait long before Chen Fa arrived at the door of Zhuowen's room. Moreover, Zhuowen knew that Chen Fa was also a member of the disciplinary hall, and he was highly regarded by the disciplinary elder. Among the many disciples of the disciplinary hall, Chen Fa was the disciple with the most potential. Because Chen Fa was highly regarded by the disciplinary elder, he was envied by the vice hall master, and was often made difficult by vice hall master Zhou Ling previously when Chen Fa met the deputy hall master. He knew that things weren't going well. Furthermore, the reason why Zhou Ling was targeting Zhuowen was largely because of Chen Fa. As for Chen Fa, it was the disciplinary elder who had arranged for him to guard the city gate. He wanted him to train there for a period of time and see more experts coming in and out, increasing Chen Fa's knowledge. Brother Zhuo, you've finally come out. Chen Fa's eyes lit up when he saw Zhuowen. Zhuowen smiled and took out a palm-sized jade bottle and handed it to Chen Fa. Seeing Chen Fa's puzzled expression, Zhuowen explained, "There are 3 Heavenly Fate pills inside." "What? Heavenly Fate pill?" Chen Fa cried out in shock and disbelief as he stared at Zhuowen. However, Chen Fa was quickly interrupted by Zhuowen. Zhuowen continued, "This is indeed a Heavenly Fate pill, but it's a semi-finished product. Its effect is far inferior to a real Heavenly Fate pill." The so-called Heavenly Fate pill was a divine pill that could help a cultivator become a Heavenly Fate Lord. After Zhuowen became a primordial chaos alchemist, he immediately tried to refine the Heavenly Fate pill. There was no doubt that Zhuowen had failed, but there were still 12 Heaven's Will pills in the cauldron. However, Zhuowen found that even though 9 of them were trash, 3 of them were not real failures and were only half-finished products. These semi-finished products weren't trash pills. They also had powerful medicinal effects, but they couldn't be compared to a real heavenly fate pill. However, these semi-finished heavenly fate pills were extremely precious treasures for primordial chaos alchemists. The medicinal effects of the heavenly fate pill were too overwhelming. Ordinary primordial chaos alchemists couldn't bear the terrifying medicinal effects of a real heavenly fate pill. Only peak primordial chaos alchemists could barely bear the effects of the heavenly fate pill and absorb a portion of its medicinal effects to have a chance of becoming a heavenly fate lord. Of course, the heavenly fate pill was most suitable for half-step heaven's fate lords. Most half-step heaven's fate lords would definitely be able to become a heavenly fate lord after taking it. The semi-finished heavenly fate pill's effects were weaker and gentler than the real heavenly fate pill. It was most suitable for primordial chaos alchemists to use. Zhuowen gave the 3 semi-finished heavenly fate pills to Chen Fa. He believed that Chen Fa, who was only an early primordial chaos alchemist, could at least reach peak primordial chaos alchemist. If he was lucky, he could even reach the half-step heaven's fate lord realm. Brother Zhua, this is too precious. You will definitely need it in the future. You don't have to give it to me. Chen Fa was very excited, but also very rational. He pushed his hand away and refused. In his opinion, the heavenly fate pill was already an extremely precious item. Although it was only a semi-finished heavenly fate pill, it wasn't something a disciple of the disciplinary hall like him could normally obtain. Moreover, Zhuowen's cultivation was lower than his. After becoming a primordial chaos alchemist, Zhuowen would need this item more than him. Therefore, Chen Fa decisively refused. Zhuowen smiled and pushed the jade bottle towards Chen Fa. I refined this semi-finished heavenly fate pill, but it failed. If I need it in the future, I will refine it again. Thank you for taking care of me before, Brother Chen. This is just a small gift to show my respect. Brother Zhua, you are a heavenly fate alchemist? Chen Fa was stunned and immediately looked at Zhuowen with excitement. Zhuowen shook his head. I'm not a heaven's mandate grade alchemist. I'm only a chaotic grade alchemist. If I was a heaven's mandate grade alchemist, then my heaven's mandate pills wouldn't have failed. Brother Zhua is too modest. If you were only a primordial chaos alchemist, it would be impossible for you to refine a semi-finished heavenly fate pill. It would definitely be a waste pill. However, you were able to refine a semi-finished heavenly fate pill. In fact, your level has already reached the level of a heavenly fate alchemist. Chen Fa said. Zhuowen was startled and revealed a thoughtful look. It seemed that he still didn't know much about the Xian Mi heavenly domain's alchemy level. The higher the level of an alchemist, the higher the grade of divine pills they could refine, but at the same time, the failure rate would also increase proportionally. A heavenly fate alchemist could refine a heavenly fate pill with a 30% success rate, which was already very impressive. However, most heavenly fate alchemists didn't even have a 30% success rate. Zhuowen, on the other hand, relied on the alchemy art in the mysterious alchemy book to achieve a terrifying success rate. His heavenly Tao divine pills had a 100% success rate, primordial Tao divine pills had a 90% success rate, and primordial chaos master pills' success rate had reached a terrifying 90% success rate. Moreover, although Zhuowen was only a primordial chaos alchemist, relying on the mysterious alchemy art, Zhuowen should have failed directly in refining the heavenly fate pill. However, he managed to refine 3 semi-finished heavenly fate pills. From this, it could be seen how much the mysterious alchemy art increased the success rate. At the same time, Zhuowen also knew how heaven-defying the mysterious alchemy art he mastered was for alchemists. If other alchemists knew that Zhuowen had such a powerful alchemy art, it would probably cause a lot of alchemists to be jealous. Of course, Even if he didn't rely on the alchemy art, Zhuowen's success rate was still higher than ordinary alchemists. Seeing Zhuowen insist, Chen Fei didn't hesitate and thanked Zhuowen. However, his heart was filled with excitement. At the same time, his impression of Zhuowen increased greatly. Chapter 27:30. Huang Yi, by the way, Brother Zhuo, why did you send me a message this time? Chen Fei put away the jade bottle and looked at Zhuowen happily. Zhuowen said, Brother Chen, there are only 3 days left until the Yun God assembly. I want to use these 3 days to get a good understanding of the city within the city. Also, where will the Yun God assembly be held? Chen Fei chuckled and patted his chest. Brother Zhuo, you've found the right person. I know of the Huangji family's city like the back of my hand. Come with me. Then Chen Fei took Zhuowen for a stroll around the city within the city. Every time they arrived at a well-known place, Chen Fei would talk nonstop about the characteristics of the place and the places that Zhuowen should pay attention to. Finally, Chen Fei brought Zhuowen to the center of the city within the city. At the center of the city was an incomparably huge palace. Describing the palace as golden and dazzling might be a bit of an understatement because the palace was simply too luxurious. This palace is the residence of the Huangji family's core members and high-level experts. It's the most luxurious place in the Huangji family. Chen Fei looked at the luxurious palace in front of him with undisguised envy in his eyes. In front of the palace, there was an extremely vast square. The extravagance of this square was almost on par with the palace behind it. It had almost everything. At this moment, the square was extremely lively and bustling. Zhuowen even saw many cultivators using their power to build all kinds of supports. It was similar to the stage on Earth in Zhuowen's previous life. Chen Fei pointed at the square and said to Zhuowen, Brother Zhuo, the Yun God assembly will be held in this square. Do you see the tower in the center of the square? Zhuowen followed Chen Fei's finger and looked at the tower in front of him. He found that there was a support at the top of the tower. This support should be used to fix something. Zhuowen was puzzled. The Sun-Moon Demon Mirror is placed at the top of the tower. When the time comes, the Great Master will use the Sun-Moon Demon Mirror and envelop the entire plaza with its power. It is said that the entire plaza will fall into a strange space-time. At that time, the Flourishing God Assembly will officially begin, Chen Fei said. Zhuowen nodded. His gaze fell on the bracket at the top of the tower, and a look of anticipation appeared on his face. Zhuowen knew that the parasite he wanted was inside the Sun and Moon Demon Mirror. Once the High God Refinement Conference began, it would be the time for him, Zhuowen, to explore and obtain the parasite. However, he also knew that the Sun-Moon Demonic Mirror was under the control of the first head of the Huangji clan after all. He had to do it secretly. Otherwise, if he was discovered, he, Zhuowen, would really be unable to escape. Yo, isn't this the gatekeeper, Chen Fei? Why aren't you guarding your door? What are you doing here? Suddenly, an ear-piercing voice was heard. As soon as the voice fell, a burst of laughter came from the other side. Zhuowen turned his head and saw a group of people coming from the east. The leader of the group was a young man with shoulder-length curly hair. The young man looked arrogant and insufferably arrogant. He was even more arrogant than Huang Zhe, the third prince of the Huangji clan. Huang Yi, why are you here? Chen Fei looked at the arrogant young man and couldn't help but frown slightly. Zhuowen revealed a look of understanding. Chen Fei had already told him about the direct descendants of the Huangji clan. There were a total of 5 heirs of the Huangji clan. Among them, Huang Zhe, whom Zhuowen had killed in the 8 heavens, was ranked 3rd among the 5 heirs. He was a hedonistic young master with a bad reputation. Moreover, his talent was not good. He was the heirs that the head master disliked the most. Huang Yi was the second prince. His talent was mediocre, and his cultivation was only at the Dao Yuan master realm. Like Huang Zhe, he was just a good-for-nothing. Of course, among the 5 princes of the Huangji clan, Huang Zhe and Huang Yi were good-for-nothings with mediocre talent. However, the other 3 princes were first-class geniuses. In particular, the eldest prince, Huang Wuqi, was exceptionally talented. He had cultivated for less than 3,000 years and was already an eternal overlord. Moreover, it was said that Huang Wuqi had the potential to break through the eternal overlord realm and enter the 3rd step of Dao validation before the age of 5,000. He was highly regarded by the 3 great masters of the Huangji clan and was one of the top monstrous geniuses in the host region. As for Huang Yi, Chen Fei had already told Zhuowen to be careful because Huang Yi and Chen Fei had some conflicts. He liked to make things difficult for Zhuowen whenever they met. Now that Zhuowen was walking with Chen Fei, he was afraid that he would attract Huang Yi's attention. Sure enough, after Chen Fei spoke, Huang Yi's gaze fell on Zhuowen, and he kept sizing him up. When he discovered that Zhuowen's aura was only that of a heavenly Dao master, his eyes revealed a trace of ridicule. Who is this trash? Why haven't I seen him before? Huang Yi sneered. Zhuowen raised his eyebrows. He hadn't expected Huang Yi to call him trash. This was clearly an insult. In my opinion, you don't seem to be any better than me, right? Zhuowen replied indifferently. This sentence seemed to have angered Huang Yi. Huang Yi stared coldly at Zhuowen and said, "What did you say? Do you dare say it again in front of me?" Zhuowen looked at Huang Yi calmly and said, "I said you aren't any better than me? If you say I'm trash, then you're trash too." Good, good, good. Huang Yi repeated the word good 3 times, but the murderous intent in his eyes was surging like a raging storm. Zhuowen's eyes turned cold. He had only retorted, and Huang Yi wanted to kill him. Die! Huang Yi stretched out his right hand and grabbed at Zhuowen without hesitation. It was obvious that he wanted to kill Zhuowen with a single palm strike. He was a Dao Yuan master, so it was naturally easy for him to kill a heavenly Dao master with a single strike. Boom! Chen Fei stood in front of Zhuowen and pushed Huang Yi back with a single palm strike. He said in a low voice, "Second Prince, aren't you going too far? Brother Zhuo is my guest. Don't involve him in our conflict." Huang Yi's eyes narrowed, and he took a few steps back. He looked coldly at Chen Fei and said, "Chen Fei, this trash dared to insult me. I didn't kill his entire family and only killed him. That's already the greatest mercy I can give him. How dare you stand in front of me? Aren't you looking down on me too much?" Chen Fei snorted coldly. He still stood in front of Zhuowen and stared coldly at Huang Yi. "Lu Qi, attack him. Blast Chen Fei away." Huang Yi ordered a man behind him. The man was silent. He took a step forward, and a surge of energy surged out of his body and poured onto Chen Fei like an avalanche. Chen Fei's expression changed slightly because he realized that the man's aura was extremely vast. He was actually an expert in the later stage of Hunyuan Master, and his cultivation was even higher than his. Chapter 27:31. Huang Yi enraged bang. 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 Instantly, Chen Fei and the guard, Lu Qi, began to fight. A terrifying force erupted, spreading out like ripples in all directions, distorting space and shattering the void. Chen Fei was only at the early stage of Hunyuan Lord, which was slightly weaker than Lu Qi's cultivation. Therefore, Chen Fei was instantly at a disadvantage. However, It wouldn't be easy for Lu Qi to defeat Chen Fa. After all, Chen Fa wasn't some random Tom, Dick, or Harry. The commotion caused by Chen Fa and Lu Qi's battle attracted the attention of many cultivators in the square. That's Chen Fa from the Hall of Penal Law. The one fighting with him seems to be the second prince's bodyguard, Lu Qi. Why are the two of them fighting? Don't you know that Chen Fa has a conflict with the second prince? If Chen Fa wasn't valued by the elder of penal law, the second prince would have cut him into pieces. With the elder of penal law's support, the second prince can only find trouble with Chen Fa. Look, the second prince is walking towards the white-clothed youth behind Chen Fa. The white-clothed youth is only a heavenly Tao master. It seems like he's going to suffer. Discussions broke out, but the direction of the discussion quickly changed. The focus of attention shifted from Chen Fa and Lu Qi to the white-clothed youth not far away. The white-clothed youth was very ordinary. His aura was only that of a heavenly Tao master. He was considered insignificant in the entire square and wasn't worth mentioning. But now, in front of the white-clothed youth, the second son of the Huangji clan, Huang, was slowly walking over, and the direction he was walking towards just happened to be where the white-clothed youth was. The crowd wasn't blind. They could see the malicious intent on Huang Yi's face. They knew that the white-clothed youth was going to suffer. Huang Yi was going to personally teach the white-clothed youth a lesson. Huang Yi's status was the same as Huang Zhe's. His position in the Huangji clan was actually quite awkward. The Huangji aristocratic family valued talent and strength more than bloodline. Although Huang Yi was a direct descendant, his innate talent was the same as Huang Zhe's. Moreover, he was a hedonistic son who liked to stir up trouble. There were many talented disciples in the Huangji clan who did not think highly of Huang Yi. Of course, no matter how useless Huang Yi was, he was still a Tao origin master. It was easy for a Tao origin bishop to teach a heavenly Tao master a lesson. Therefore, the spectators all silently mourned for the white-clothed youth. Huang Yi's gaze was ferocious as he slowly walked towards Zhuowen with a sinister smile on his face. Huang Yi had an extremely strong sense of superiority in his heart. As far as he was concerned, he only needed to make a move, and this white-clothed young man before him would kneel and beg for mercy. Kneel down and lick my shoes clean. Then raise your head and apologize to me. Huang Yi walked in front of Zhuowen and lifted his right foot. His cold eyes burst forth with a mocking light as he sneered. Zhuowen's gaze turned cold. This Huang Yi really did not know what was good for him. He, Zhuowen, did not intend to stir up trouble, but Huang Yi did not want to let him go. Did he really think that Zhuowen was easy to bully? Scram! Zhuowen said coldly, and did not pay any more attention to Huang Yi. Huang Yi squinted his eyes and sneered. You're quite stubborn. However, I would like to see if you can still be so stubborn. As he spoke, Huang Yi's right hand formed into a claw and suddenly stretched out towards Zhuowen's neck. It was obvious that he wanted to grab Zhuowen like an eagle grabbing a chick. Many cultivators in the surroundings saw this scene and secretly shook their heads. They felt that this white-clothed youth did not know how to appreciate favors. He actually knew Huang Yi's identity and was still so stubborn. Wasn't he looking for trouble? Zhuowen sneered in his heart and casually threw out a punch. This punch was ordinary and looked like a punch thrown by a child. When Huang Yi saw that Zhuowen actually dared to throw out a punch, he could not help but laugh out loud. His eyes were filled with contempt and disdain. Crack! Suddenly, the crisp sound of bones cracking was heard. Immediately, the crowd looked at the scene in front of them in a daze. The moment Huang Yi's claw came into contact with the right fist of the white-clothed youth, It immediately twisted and bent. Then the white-clothed youth's forearm, elbow, and even his arm were all twisted and broken into pieces. Bang, 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 bang. A bloody mist erupted as Huang Yi's right hand was directly blasted into a bloody pulp. On the other hand, Zhuo Wen's ordinary punch was like a hot knife through butter. After annihilating Huang Yi's right arm, it smashed onto his chest. Puff! Huang Yi spat out a mouthful of blood. His waist arched like a cooked prawn, and he was immediately sent flying. He was in a sorry state and crashed onto the ground. He kept twitching and struggling. The surrounding atmosphere suddenly became much colder. The crowd was shocked and did not dare to breathe loudly. They just stared blankly at the scene. Everyone was in disbelief. Although Huang Yi's talent was not good, he was still a Dao Yuan master. A Dao Yuan master was one realm higher than the Heaven Dao master. It was natural for a Dao Yuan master to crush the Heaven Dao master. But now, Huang Yi, who was a Dao Yuan master, had been beaten up like a dead dog by the white-clothed youth, who was just a Heaven Dao master. This made everyone's jaws drop. What's going on? What just happened is really against common sense. The second prince was beaten up just like that. You're right. The second prince was really beaten up. Moreover, he was beaten up by the Heaven Dao master with just one punch. It seems that this white-clothed youth is a tough guy. He hid his strength well. However, this white-clothed youth is too ruthless. He actually beat up the second prince. You should know that this is the Huangji family. Not many people dare to beat up the direct descendant of the Huangji family. This is the worst thing that has happened in the past few years. The crowd was discussing animatedly. However, when they looked at Zhuo, they were first shocked and then ridiculed him. Although Huang Yi was a good-for-nothing, he was still the second prince of the Huangji family. His status was not something an ordinary disciple could compare to. Even if it was indeed Huang Yi's mistake at the beginning, there really wasn't anyone in the Huangji clan who dared to be as heavy-handed as Zhuo Wen, directly destroying Huang Yi's right arm. Looking at the injury on Huang Yi's right arm, everyone knew that it would be difficult for his right arm to recover without the help of precious herbs. Chen Fei and Lu Qi, who were originally standing together aggressively, were also stunned when they saw this scene. Lu Qi threw a punch at Chen Fei and immediately swept to Huang Yi's side like a hurricane. He kowtowed repeatedly and said, "Second prince, I did not protect you well. Please punish me." Huang Yi screamed in pain. His voice was like a pig facing a butcher's knife. It was extremely shrill and ear-piercing. "Lu Qi, you kill him for me." Huang Yi's face was pale. Due to the intense pain, he was stuttering and trembling. Chapter 2732. Reminder from the law enforcement patriarch. How dare you hurt the second prince? You must be tired of living. I will kill you today as an apology to the second prince. Lu Qi's eyes were cold as he struck out with his right palm. Surging energy rippled out and then condensed into an even more vast and terrifying energy wave at the center. The shape of this energy wave was somewhat similar to a palm. Soon after, this energy wave suddenly descended, instantly arriving above Zhuo Wen's head. Zhuo Wen's eyes were cold. Just as he was about to make a move, he narrowed his eyes and quietly withdrew his right hand. Then he stood calmly in place. Rumble! Just as the energy wave was about to hit Zhuo Wen's head, an even more powerful energy came from behind Zhuo Wen and finally hit the energy wave. Lu Qi's pupils constricted, and he involuntarily retreated backwards as a terrifying shockwave swept out. When Lu Qi came to a stop, there were two extremely deep marks on the ground in front of him. Those were the marks left by his feet because they could not bear the force of the impact. Puqi, Lu Qi froze in place, spitting out a mouthful of blood as he stared in horror at something behind Zhuowen. Behind Zhuowen, an old man in a loose robe slowly walked over. There were some wrinkles on the old man's face. His eyes were slightly downcast, but he exuded an even more profound and dignified aura. Elder of Law Enforcement, Lu Qi's face darkened as he recognized the old man. Second Prince Huang, he also revealed an expression of disbelief as he stared blankly at the elder. Shortly after, when he regained his senses, he hurriedly cried out, "Disciplinary elder, what do you mean by this? Lu Qi is my personal bodyguard. What are you trying to do by attacking my personal bodyguard?" The surrounding people were also discussing spiritedly. Many of them guessed that the law enforcement elder had taken action because of the white-clothed young man. After all, Lu Qi had attacked the white-clothed young man, and the law enforcement elder had acted coincidentally. The law enforcement elder was obviously helping the white-clothed young man. The law enforcement elder's eyes were calm. He glanced at Zhuowen before looking at Huang Yi again. Second Prince, this young man is a disciple of the Hall of Penal Law. I hope you can give me some face and not pursue this matter further. As soon as the law enforcement elder's words came out, the surrounding people were in an uproar. The law enforcement elder had always been impartial. His image of fairness and justice was deeply rooted in the hearts of the people. He had never been biased or biased. But now, the law enforcement elder, who had always been impartial, was openly siding with the white-clothed young man. Everyone couldn't help but wonder who the white-clothed young man was. He had actually provoked the law enforcement elder to openly side with him. Huang Yi's expression also turned ugly. Although he was the second prince, his status should be on par with the disciplinary elder. However, that wasn't the case. Huang Yi's talent was too weak, and he was only a profligate. Relying on the fact that he was a direct descendant, he was indeed able to intimidate others. However, compared to the elders of the Huang Ji family, who possessed real power, his status was still much weaker. The law enforcement elder's words were above his. Since the former had spoken, he had to consider carefully. Second Prince, I won't let you suffer a loss. This is a golden spike pill. It can restore your right arm. Moreover, I will compensate you with 100,000 high-grade heavenly law origin crystals, said the law enforcement elder. Huang Yi's expression only improved when he saw the law enforcement elder's golden spike pill. The golden spike pill was a divine pill of mixed yuan level. It was extremely valuable. Moreover, it could completely restore the disability caused by heavenly law energy. The golden spike pill was perfect for Huang Yi's situation. Moreover, 100,000 high-grade heavenly law origin crystals was not a small sum. Even a prince like Huang Yi could not take out so many high-grade heavenly law origin crystals in a short period of time. In a spurt of energy, the law enforcement elder immediately took out a spirit ring and handed it to Huang Yi. Second Prince, there are 100,000 high-grade heavenly law origin crystals in this spirit ring. As for the golden spike pill, I will send a disciple to give it to you after this. Huang Yi's expression improved. He took the spirit ring and checked it. After confirming that there were indeed 100,000 high-grade heavenly law origin crystals inside, he nodded and forced himself to stand up. Since the law enforcement elder has come forward to plead for mercy, I will spare your worthless life. Huang Yi coldly glanced at Zhuowen and continued, however, you can't escape punishment. Break one of your arms, and I won't pursue this matter any further. Zhuowen's gaze was calm. If you want one of my arms, you can come and take it yourself. What are you dawdling over there for? Huang Yi's expression changed slightly, and then he said angrily, dog that doesn't know how to appreciate favors. If it wasn't for the law enforcing elder, I would have already gotten someone to tear you apart. How could I let you be so arrogant and despotic? Do you really think I'm afraid of you today? Zhuowen smiled faintly. He didn't take Huang Yi seriously at all. Even if the law enforcement elder personally attacked Zhuowen, he wouldn't be afraid, let alone Huang Yi, who was only a Dao Yuan master. Zhuowen wouldn't necessarily be afraid. Zhuowen's disregard angered Huang Yi instantly. Just as Huang Yi was about to explode, the law enforcement elder hurriedly stepped forward to mediate. Only then did Huang Yi's anger subside, slightly. Little bastard, don't think that you'll be safe after escaping today. I'll let you off today for the sake of the law enforcement elder. But let me tell you, the law enforcement elder can protect you for a while, but do you think he can protect you forever? After saying this, Huang Yi hurriedly left with Lu Qi. He, the second prince, was defeated by a nobody in one move. This was too humiliating. Since he couldn't deal with Zhuowen now, he naturally wouldn't stay here to embarrass himself. After Huang Yi left, the surrounding cultivators gradually dispersed as well. Elder! Chen Fa hurriedly came before the law enforcement elder and said with a hint of shame. The law enforcement elder merely nodded at Chen Fa. Then he looked at Zhuowen with a hint of sternness in his eyes. Zhuowen, do you know how stupid you were just now? I know that you're strong, but you're just a person after all. This is the core area of the Huangji family, a Dao Mansion-level force. Huang Yi is indeed no match for you. Even Huang Yi's personal guard, Lu Qi, is no match for you. However, Huang Yi is the second prince of the Huangji family. His status is far above yours. As long as Huang Yi gives the order, countless cultivators around here will be willing to work for him to kill you. If that really happens, your life will be in danger. The law enforcement elder spoke slowly, his voice filled with dissatisfaction.